Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. Attention! Unidentified passenger on board. I'd taken the train from Delaware to D.C. many times before. 7:53 p.m. out of Wilmington, arriving at 9:36. The tickets were cheap, and the train was mostly empty around that time. It was perfect. Tonight was no different. I sat in the window seat as usual, reading as the train rocked gently back and forth. About 20 minutes into the ride, however, the intercom came on overhead. Attention! Unidentified passenger on board. I looked up. Unidentified passenger? I glanced around the car. There was only the middle-aged woman I saw when I got on, several rows back. She was looking up, confused. What the hell? The voice overhead was different, too. It wasn't the usual garbled man's voice. It was a woman's, monotone and robotic. Do they mean like some kind of serial killer just got on or something? My stomach dropped. Wouldn't they say something more extreme, though? Like, Hyde, we're making an emergency stop? This almost sounded like they were announcing someone hadn't paid for their ticket. I glanced at the front of the car, where the LED marquee was. Instead of listing the next station stop, it said, unidentified passenger, unidentified passenger, unidentified passenger. The letters scrolled past, over and over, jittering orange pixels. Maybe they mean someone a Russian spy, or something, or maybe it was just some sort of glitch. I stared at the orange letters. Unidentified passenger. I texted my boyfriend. The train saying there's an unidentified passenger on board? Really weird. It's got to be fake, right? Or should I get off? He replied instantly. That's really weird. Maybe get off. I can take the next train up to you. Where are you? I pulled up maps and checked our location. We were just a few minutes from Aberdeen. After hesitating for a second, I grabbed my bag. It probably is just some glitch or something, but I'm not going to be some sitting duck. I turned to the aisle. A woman was standing right in front of me. The middle-aged woman from the back of the car. I jumped, banging my head on the overhead luggage rack. Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you, but do you know what's going on? She asked. I shook my head. This has got to be a joke or something, right? What do they mean? Unidentified passenger? I don't know. I'm getting off just in case. I slipped past her into the aisle and started for the vestibule between cars. Good idea, she said. She hurried back to her seat and started grabbing her things. I pressed a button for the door and stepped into the vestibule. The metal floor shook underneath me. The landscape outside the train was pure black, except for a single small light twinkling in the distance. The door behind me opened, and the woman stepped in, clutching her bag close to her chest like a shield. I'm supposed to be at my daughter's wedding tomorrow morning, she muttered, messing with her ashy blonde hair. We just got back on good terms. If I'm even a minute late, I glanced at the window into the next car. It was empty, except for a single man near the front. I could just see the top of his head poking over the seat. He wasn't packing his stuff, or even moving. Maybe we're overreacting, I thought for a second. No, this is how people get hurt. Not changing their plans when the alarm bells start going. As soon as something is off, you get out, period. My mom had taught me that a long time ago. The train wobbled and shook. Lights grew in the distance, twinkling through the darkness. We were approaching. I stepped closer to the door, staring out the little square window. The lights grew larger. The concrete platform rolled into sight. The squat brick building, the dark windows, silver sign, Aberdeen Station. We blew right past it. I stared out the window. We just passed the station. No, what really? I nodded. Before I could say anything else, the intercom clicked to life. Attention, passengers. Please remain in your original train car for the duration of the ride. Thank you. The woman's voice again. Monotonous. Slow. What the hell? The woman whispered. I glanced through the window into the next car. The man was still sitting there, completely still. No, wait, not still. As the train took a curve, his head bobbed and lolled on his shoulders. Limply, as if he were, I ran back to the door of our train car, slammed the button, the door shuddered open, and we slipped inside. That guy, there was something seriously, I could barely choke out the words. I know. Do you think he was? She couldn't bring herself to say it. It kind of looked like that. I glanced back at the door into the vestibule. It was still empty, but the marquee above the door now read, "Stay in your car, stay in your car, stay in your car." What do we do? I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, the woman, and I began talking at once. On a train. Someone's dead. It won't stop. Just past Aberdeen. The operator said she'd get someone out to us. But deep down I knew, what could they possibly do? If whoever was driving the train wouldn't stop, how could the police intervene? Set up a blockade? Possibly kill us in the crash? I stared out the window. Golden lights flew by. Clusters of suburbs, disappearing back into the darkness. I swallowed. You can't survive jumping out of a moving train, can you? I don't think so at this speed, she replied. Silence pressing on us. We should hide in the bathroom, she said. It has a lock. It'll keep us safe. It says stay in the car, I said, pointing to the marquee. And you trust whoever it is putting that up? The bathroom doors are flimsy anyway, I said. If someone wants to get us, they will. I closed my eyes, running my hands down my face. Could we just be freaking out over nothing? Maybe that guy, maybe he was just sleeping. Maybe they passed a stop for some other reason. Maybe it really is just some glitch. The lights overhead flickered, and then went out. What the fuck? I whimpered. The train car was only lit by the orange glow of the marquee at the front of the car. It was still flashing the same message. Stay in your seats, stay in your seats, stay in your seats. This is insane, the woman whispered. I texted my boyfriend. The lights just went out. We called 911. I don't know how they're going to get us off the train. I hit send and closed my eyes. Wait, the lights being out, maybe that helps us, the woman said. We can hide better. What are the chances he'll find us in the entire train? She crouched down. I don't think we can fit under the seats. There are benches at the back. I bet we can fit there. I slowly felt my way through the darkness of the car, pressing my hands into the cloth seat backs on either side. We reached the last aisle, where the seat configuration had been altered to have benches facing each other, with a space in the middle. I squeezed down into the space between the seats, then shuffled under the first bench. The woman did the same, squeezing under the second. I felt too hot. The rug scratched my arms. The metal of the seat pressed against my head. I twisted my legs and pushed myself back so that my head wasn't poking out into the aisle. We were decently well hidden. But if the guy or whoever was found us, there was no way we could escape. We were trapped. We lay there underneath the seats for what felt like an eternity. The car rocked and swayed underneath us. My hair fell into my face. My legs ached. I knew Harry was probably texting me back, but I'd silenced my phone and it was deep in my pocket. I couldn't contort to get it out. Not that I'd want to. What if they came by while I was looking at my phone and found us because of the light? I was jolted back to reality by the shuddering sound of the door opening. No, 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 no. I strained to listen. Soft, thumping footsteps sounded on the far end of the car. Slow and methodical. Quiet, like they were stalking their prey. The footsteps grew louder. I held my breath. Thump. A black, leather-men's shoe stepped into view. No, it glistened in the orange light, almost as if it were wet. My lungs burned. Please don't look. Please. Please. Go. Keep walking. Go. 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 They hesitated. shoes frozen on the carpet, inches from my face. Then they finally took another step, and another. The door behind us shuddered open, and then closed. I let out my breath out in short, silent little bursts, then sucked in another breath as slowly as possible. They passed us. We're okay. We're fine. I turned my head to look at the woman. Tears were rolling down her face as she stared back at me. It's okay. He didn't see us. I whispered. Her mouth hung open. Her lips trembled. It's okay. I whispered again, but she didn't even blink. That's when I realized she wasn't staring at me. She was staring past me. I turned around. My blood ran cold. There was something at the door, pressing its face against the window, fogging up the glass. No, the person that just passed us wasn't it. That was just another passenger, trying to stay quiet, trying to hide. Maybe even the guy we thought was dead. It was that thing in the window. Eyes pitch black, skin ghastly white, barely lit in the flickering orange of marquee, which now read, "Don't run, don't run, don't run." That was the unidentified passenger. The woman crawled out from under her seat. No, I whispered, but she was already slamming her hand on the door open button. It slowly shuddered open, and she began to slip through it. The door opened on the other end. Rapid footsteps. Out of sync, frantic, running. I saw a flash of bare feet and bare hands thumping against carpet. In seconds it had run past me, into the next car, before the door even had a chance to close. I heard a muffled scream, and then silence. No, not a no-no. I bit my lip, trying to stop from crying. I knew she was dead. There was no way she could have gotten away. I closed my eyes tight, trying to push it all down. Stay quiet. It went past. You just have to make it until SCCCHLLP. The door opened. White, bare hands on the carpet, slick with something dark, followed by bare feet. Oh, God, she's on all fours. She jerkily moved forward in the spider crawl until she was at my seat. She knows I'm here. No. I held my breath as its pale ankles buckled underneath the hem of its white skirt. As it began to crouch, long dark hair came into view, skimming down to the floor. More and more hair as it tilted its head down to look at me. It stopped just short of showing its face. I could see its hairline, its forehead, as it hung its head upside down, inches from my face. It stopped there, frozen, waiting. I could see its entire body shift as it breathed. I could hear the high-pitched rasp of its breath. A single drop of blood dripped onto its pale hand, but it didn't show its face. My lungs felt like they were about to burst, but I forced myself not to breathe, not to move. I stared at the hair and the blood on its hands and the dirty white dress skimming its ankles. With a creaking sound, it got up, the door slid open, and it disappeared. I took in desperate gasps of air. My lungs burned. Hot tears rolled down my face. I couldn't feel my legs or my feet. You can't leave. Don't run. Don't run, don't run. That's what the marquee had said. I would stay here forever in the darkness, even if every nerve of my body felt like it was on fire. I don't know how long I was there, crouched under the seat, trying to breathe as quietly as possible, pins and needles crawling up my legs, my head pounding, my arms numb. But then the train slowed, the lights flickered back on, and the intercom crackled to life. A man's voice as usual, now approaching Union Station. I didn't crawl out from under the seat until the train jerked to a stop, my entire body stiff, blazing with pain. I pulled myself out from under the seat, hobbled off the train, and onto the platform. I felt like I couldn't even walk. The bright lights dazed me. Footsteps clicked. Voices murmured. Suitcases rolled across the concrete. A speaker somewhere overhead announced a leaving train. When I turned back, though, I realized no one else had exited my particular train. Just me, and I didn't notice the hair until I made it into the station. A long, black hair entwined around my wrist, and my skin underneath it, blistered and red, everywhere the hair had touched. Story 2. There's a legend about the bridge in our town, and I shouldn't doubt its truth. Lucy and I became best friends on our first day of 3rd grade. That day, she punched Ridley because he pulled my hair. She was taking the principal's office, and I waited for her on the bench outside, swinging my legs, a warm feeling welling up in my chest. When she came out, her eyes were red from crying, but her chin remained firm. I gave her half of my peanut butter sandwich. "I'm allergic to peanuts," she said. "Okay, would you like some of my apple juice?" She took the apple juice, and from that moment on, we were inseparable. Growing up in Millbrook was like living in a crystal ball, beautifully enclosed, artificially creating an aesthetic. But you always knew there was a pane of glass separating you from the real world. There were only 8,000 people, 1 high school, 2 churches, and a 5-cent shop on the main street where candy cost 5 cents. It was like a place where everyone knew each other, a feeling that was reassuring until you realized it also meant everyone knew each other's secrets. Or rather, they thought they knew. Like all small towns, Millbrook is steeped in legends. Stories are passed down from brother to sister, whispered around pajama parties and campfires. Most are similar. A murder occurred in the house at the end of Buck Street in the 1950s. At midnight, you see lights floating in the cemetery, and there's the old quarry where teenagers used to go drinking, sometimes never to return. But what fascinates me most is the story of the Old Mill Bridge and the Devil's Mist. The legend goes that every 20 years, a special mist envelopes Millbrook. It's not ordinary fog, but something entirely different and absolutely silent. If you're standing on Old Mill Bridge when the Devil's Mist appears, and you sing a specific song as you cross, the mist will transport you to another place. Not just a different geographical location, but a completely different world. Another version of Millbrook, a parallel universe where everything is entirely different. The song is probably She Moved to the Fair, an old Irish folk song. The melody is said to be repetitive, telling a tragic story of discovering a loved one's death. Legend has it that you must sing the lyrics 3 times continuously while crossing the bridge, without looking back. If you sing it correctly, you will enter another world when the fog dissipates. Most people treat this as a joke. Every 20 years, on the night the fog is supposed to appear, teenagers make bets to see who dares to sing this song while crossing the bridge. But nothing happens. When the fog dissipates, they remain in familiar Millbrook, perhaps a little disappointed, but mostly relieved. The last time the fog appeared was in 1995, 5 years before Lucy and I were born. This meant the next fog would arrive in 2015, when we were 15. Lucy and I spent hours discussing it, planning to sneak out that night to experience the ritual ourselves, purely for fun. But by 2015, we had almost completely forgotten about it. We were busy with high school, busy dating boys, and busy with the anxieties of being 17 and thinking we knew everything. Lucy's dad was one of the topics we no longer talked about. Mr. Thompson had always been different. I remember him as a child, a tall, thin man with kind eyes doing odd jobs in town. He had been a janitor at the elementary school, then a gardener at the cemetery, and then unemployed for a while. Lucy never wanted to talk about why he kept losing jobs, but I heard rumors, adults whispering, alcoholic, unreliable, and later only homeless. By the time we were in high school, Mr. Thompson had become an invisible man in Millbrook. You would occasionally see him in the city center, sitting on a bench outside the library or begging for change near the grocery store. People would go out of their way to avoid him. Lucy no longer invited me to her house. Well, there weren't many houses left to invite me to. She lived with her father in a rundown apartment above the laundromat, and I knew she was ashamed of it. But Lucy never stopped loving him. She would secretly stuff food from the school cafeteria into her bag to feed him. She would give him the money she earned as a babysitter. When other kids mocked him, she would stand up for him without hesitation. "He's sick," she would say, her voice strained. "It's not his fault. If people help him instead of judging him, he'll get better." I believed her. I always believed Lucy. That fall, around our 17th birthday, everything changed. Lucy started acting strange. She was always nervous and distracted and constantly looking back as if someone was following her. She no longer stayed up late after school for cheerleading practice. She would turn pale when she received a phone call. "Is everything all right?" I asked her one October day. Watch her stare at her phone, her expression unreadable. "Yes," she blurted out, her voice too hurried. "Everything's fine." But I knew things weren't good. Things weren't good. I just didn't expect things to get this bad. November 15th, 2015, Sunday. I remember it clearly because Coach Henderson annoyed me by scheduling cheerleading practice on Sunday night. We were supposed to be home watching movies. We had an important game coming up, and she made us practice over and over until it was perfect. Lucy and I were the last ones left in the gym, practicing a throw, but we kept failing. I tossed her up. She turned, but she just wouldn't land properly. On the 7th try, she landed hard on her ankle, yelling in pain. "That's it," I said, grabbing my bag. "This is it. If this keeps up, you'll ruin your ankle. If I don't get it right by Friday, the coach will kill me." "The coach can handle it. Let's go home." We walked into November night, our breath condensing into mist in the cold air. The sun had already set when we practiced, and the temperature had dropped. I pulled my coat tighter. "Want to go to Angie Mama's for pizza?" I asked. Angie Mama's is in the city center, open late on weekends, and always a popular spot for all the high school students. Lucy shook her head. "No, I have to go home." "Why? Do you have a date?" "No, I have to go see my dad. He wasn't feeling well this morning." I wanted to ask what wasn't feeling well meant, but the closed-off look on Lucy's face suggested she didn't want to talk about it. So I just nodded and we started walking. Millbrook wasn't a big town. You could walk from one end to the other in less than an hour. Lucy and I lived on opposite sides of Old Miller Bridge. I lived in a nicer neighborhood with big houses and manicured lawns. She lived on the east side, in an area of apartments and small houses. Over the years, we'd walked home together hundreds of times from school, practice fields, and friend houses. This had become our daily routine, and it made us feel safe. The bridge was almost exactly halfway between our two worlds. About 5 minutes from the bridge, I noticed the temperature had dropped again. The air was damp and heavy. I could see my breath condense into a thick white mist. "This weather is weird," Lucy said, rubbing her arms. "Yeah." We reached the bridge entrance. Old Miller Bridge was an old bridge, built in the 1920s, entirely made of wooden planks and rusty iron railings. The townspeople had always said they wanted to tear it down and build a modern bridge, but the budget had never been right. So the bridge stood there quietly, creaking and swaying slightly as you walked across it, with Miller Creek flowing 30 feet below. The street lights disappeared about 20 feet from the bridgehead. There were no lights on the bridge, so crossing at night meant traversing a long stretch of darkness before reaching the light on the other side. We stepped onto the bridge, and just then the fog began to roll in. At first, the fog were just wisps of smoke, clinging to our ankles like curious kittens. But within seconds it thickened, rising from the stream below and surging in from all directions. I'd seen fog before. Millbrook sometimes gets foggy in the fall, but never this thick. It was almost solid, pure white and impenetrable. "Wow!" Lucy gasped. "This fog is so thick." Then I remembered. November 15th, 2015. 20 years since the last time it appeared. "Lucy," I said slowly, "what's the date?" "What?" "November 15th. What's wrong?" "The legend. That bridge. This should be impossible." Lucy's eyes widened. "The fog? That's just a story. Then what is this?" We stood there, the fog thickening until I could barely see Lucy, even though she was right beside me. The temperature plummeted, and my teeth began to chatter. "We should go back," I said. But when I turned, I couldn't see the way we'd come. The fog swallowed everything. I couldn't see the town behind me. I couldn't see the end of the bridge. Nothing but white. "I can't see the way back," Lucy said, and for the first time, I heard fear in her voice. Okay, let's keep going. The bridge isn't that long. It'll be on the other side in 2 minutes. "Jenny, what if it's real? What about the legend?" "Then let's not sing. We'll just walk across silently. It's simple." Lucy grabbed my hand. Her fingers were cold, or perhaps mine were. "Don't let go," she whispered. "I won't, I promise." We started walking. Our footsteps echoed on the wooden planks, muffled by the fog, sounding somewhat eerie. I silently counted my steps, trying to gauge how far we'd gone. 10 steps, 20 steps, 30 steps. We should be on the other side by now. The bridge isn't that long. "Jenny, I feel like we're going in circles." Impossible. We're walking in a straight line. But she was right. Something was wrong. We felt like we'd been walking for 5 minutes, yet we were still enveloped in fog, still standing on the bridge. Unless we hadn't moved at all, maybe we were just standing still, and the fog was creating an illusion of movement. "Sing a song," Lucy suddenly said. "What?" "Sing a song. Any song. I want to hear your voice. I need to know you're still here." So I started singing. The first song that came to mind was the one we learned in elementary school music class. In beautiful Dublin, the girls are so beautiful, and I saw sweet Molly Marlin at first glance. But what I sang was, "My young love said to me, my mother won't mind, and my father won't slight you for your lack of kind." And she stepped away from me, and this she did say, "It will not be long, love, till our wedding day." "Jenny, no." Lucy gripped my hand tightly. "Don't sing that song. It's a legendary song." I stopped immediately, my heart pounding. I didn't mean to. It was just the first song that came to mind. Then think of something else. But it was all set in stone. Perhaps it was destined from the moment we stepped onto the bridge, because the fog had changed. It no longer merely enveloped us. It penetrated us, cold and intrusive, as it tried to reach into our hearts and reshape something fundamental. I felt Lucy's hand slip from mine. "Lucy!" No response. "Lucy!" I whirled around and outstretched my hands, but could only grasp at the cold air. The fog was so thick I couldn't even see my own hands. "Lucy!" I stumbled forward, or perhaps backward. I couldn't tell. My foot tripped over something, and I fell, my hand slamming heavily against the wood. I knelt, gasping for breath, fear gripping my throat. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the fog dissipated. I was on the other side of the bridge, kneeling on the sidewalk of Maple Avenue, bathed in the harsh yellow light of the streetlights. Behind me, the bridge stretched into ordinary darkness. The fog was gone. The November night was clear and starry. Lucy was gone. The next few hours I remember almost nothing, only a chaotic jumble of panic and disbelief. I remember running back to the bridge, screaming Lucy's name. I remember shining my phone's flashlight into the stream below, terrified to see her body lying on the rocks. I remember Mr. Peterson coming out of the house in his bathrobe and asking if I was all right. "My friend," I said over and over. "My friend Lucy. She was with me. She's missing." Mr. Peterson called my parents. My parents called the police. The police came with flashlights and searched the bridge, the creek, and the woods on both sides. They asked me questions. What was I doing? Had we been drinking? Had Lucy said she was upset? Had we argued? No, nothing. We were just on our way home. Suddenly it got foggy. She took my hand, and then she didn't. The policeman, Officer Davidson, whom I'd known since I was a child, he'd given a lecture in my elementary school about the dangers of strangers, looked at me with that pitying look that made me want to scream. "Jenny, honey, there's no fog tonight. It's been clear weather all night. There is fog. There's fog on the bridge. It's so thick I can't see anything. Shall we take you home? It's late. You must be terrified." They took me home. Mom made me hot chocolate, but I couldn't drink it. Dad sat on the edge of the bed, gently stroking my hair like he used to do in my childhood nightmares. "Everything will be all right," he said. "We'll find your friend." But his voice sounded off, hollow. It was as if he was saying what he should say, but not from a heart. I didn't sleep that night. At 6 in the morning, I started dialing Lucy's cell phone. No answer. At 7, I went downstairs. Mom was making breakfast. "Mom, we have to go to Lucy's. We have to see her dad. He must know where she is." Mom's hand hovered over the coffee pot, without turning around. "Jenny, honey, I think you should eat something. You must be exhausted. I'm not hungry. I have to find Lucy. Baby. She finally turned around, her face full of concern. Lucy doesn't exist. These words sounded nonsensical. I heard them, but my mind went blank. What? You were alone on the bridge last night. The police investigated school records. There is no student named Lucy Thompson at Millbrook High School. Never. Impossible. She's my best friend. We've been friends since 3rd grade. She's on the cheerleading team with me. She was practicing last night. Coach Henderson was there too. She saw Lucy. Coach Henderson said you practiced alone late last night. You asked her if you could practice your stunts by yourself. No, that's not right. Lucy was there. Lucy is real. Mom came over and hugged me. I stood stiffly in her arms, my mind a jumble. This wasn't right. Nothing was right. Lucy was real. I had so many memories of her. Hundreds and thousands. The day we ate sandwiches together in 3rd grade. For Halloween in 6th grade, we dressed up as ketchup and mustard. In freshman year, we were both kept after school for passing notes in English class. Just last week, we were studying chemistry. I was doing a test at the kitchen table, and Lucy made up a funny song to help me remember the periodic table. I think we should take you to see Dr. Morrison, Mom said gently. He can help you. Dr. Morrison was the only psychiatrist in Millbrook. He was a kind old man with white hair and a soft voice. I had seen him once before, when my grandmother had passed away and I couldn't sleep. That afternoon I went to see him. I sat in the leather chair in his book-filled office and told him everything about Lucy, about the fog. Almost everyone was acting as if she had never existed. He listened quietly, without interrupting, his hands clasped under his chin. After I finished, he was silent for a long time. Jenny, he finally spoke. Have you ever heard of false memories? Lucy wasn't a false memory. She was real. Our brains are amazing. Sometimes, especially under stress, it creates very vivid, very realistic memories that never actually happened. It's a coping mechanism. I'm not crazy. I didn't say you're crazy. I said your brain might be trying to help you cope with something. Has anything very stressful happened in your life recently? I really wanted to throw something at his understanding face, but I didn't. I just sat there, my hands clenched tightly on my knees, feeling something deep inside me begin to crumble. Over the next few days, I tried everything. I went to the school and asked them to re-examine the records. I went to the cheerleading coach and showed her the photos on my phone. But when I opened the album, there were no pictures of Lucy, only photos of myself. In every place I remembered Lucy being. I went to the apartment where Lucy and her father lived. It was empty, not just empty, but there was no sign of anyone having ever lived there. The walls were bare and the floors were covered in dust. The landlord said the apartment had been vacant for 6 months. I went downtown, looking for Lucy's father, the homeless man everyone knew. I asked shopkeepers, other homeless people, anyone willing to listen. Nobody knew who I was talking about. They said there was no homelessness problem in Millbrook. People here can take care of themselves. I searched for Lucy Thompson online, social media, school records, birth certificate. Nothing. It was as if she had been erased from existence. She was gone, erased from the past, as if she had never existed. Yet, I remember her. I remember everything about her. Slowly and terrifyingly, I began to doubt myself. Maybe I'm going crazy. Maybe I created a fabricated friend, unable to distinguish between fantasy and reality. Maybe that fog never happened. Maybe I walked across that bridge alone, as I had countless times before, and something in my brain suddenly collapsed. People started looking at me strangely. Conversations would abruptly stop the moment I entered a room. I noticed my teachers looking at me with concern. My parents began. They made up all sorts of excuses to prevent me from going out with my friends, forcing me to stay home and rest. 2 weeks after that night on the bridge, I stopped mentioning Lucy. What else could I do? But I never forgot her. And deep down, I never stopped believing she had ever existed. After graduating high school, I left Millbrook immediately. I went to 2 universities out of state, earning a degree in psychology, perhaps to understand what had happened to me, perhaps to prove I wasn't insane. In my junior year, I met George in a cognitive neuroscience class. George was reassuring. George was rational and kind, and believed in things that could be measured and proven. George didn't believe the fog would devour people, nor did he believe the town would erase the girl's existence. George believed in synapses, neurons, and chemical reactions. I never mentioned Lucy to him. A year after graduation, we got married. The wedding was held in court. It was a small affair, attended only by immediate family. We moved to a suburb 40 miles from Millbrook, close enough to visit, but far enough so I wouldn't have to see the bridge every day. We bought a small house with a yard. George got a job at a research hospital. I opened a private practice, primarily serving teenagers, trying to help them through trauma in ways no one had ever helped me with before. We had Lucy first. I named her in memory. And 2 years later, Michael. My love for them was sometimes so intense it frightened me. I would check on them constantly at night, making sure they were still breathing, still real, still around. George thought I was overprotective. He didn't understand how quickly I knew people could disappear. The nightmare began around the time, Michael. It started 6 months after I was born. It's always the same dream. I'm pushing a stroller across a bridge. Fog is thick. I look down at the stroller. It's empty. I search in the fog, calling out to my children, but I can't find them. Sometimes in the dream, I'm constantly searching for my children. Sometimes I'm looking for Lucy. Sometimes I can't even remember who I've lost, only that they're gone and it's all my fault. I wake up at the start, gasping for breath, the sheets soaked with sweat, my heart pounding as if it can explode. George will hold me, gently comforting me, saying it's okay, it's just, I dreamt that the children were all fine and everything would be all right, but that wasn't the case. The nightmares grew worse. 3, 4, or 5 times a night. I was afraid to sleep. During the day, I started seeing things too. Shadows moving like people, whispers coming from the whirring of the baby monitor. I was playing with the children when suddenly, a strong conviction washed over me. They weren't real, just like everyone said. I was imagining Lucy. One morning at 3, George found me standing by Michael's crib, silently weeping. She's real, I whispered. Lucy is real. I held her hand. I know I did. Jen, honey, you need to talk to someone. This isn't healthy. I've talked to people. They all say I made her up. Then maybe, he paused, choose his words carefully. Maybe you need to accept it. Maybe that's the only way you can heal. I looked at him, the man I married, the man with whom I built my life, and felt utterly alone. I'll call tomorrow, I said. I'll seek help. Dr. Patricia's office was filled with the scent of lavender and old books. She was in her 60s, her silver hair meticulously pulled back in a bun, her eyes revealing so much. George had found her online, the best trauma therapist in the state, he said. I didn't immediately tell her about Lucy. I spoke indirectly about nightmares, anxiety, and the feeling of not being able to trust myself. She listened quietly, without judgment, occasionally taking notes and asking gentle questions. It wasn't until the 4th session that she asked, Jenny, when did these nightmares start? Can you trace them back to a specific event? Suddenly, I told her everything. About Lucy, about the bridge, about the fog, about everyone saying she didn't exist. I talked for an hour straight, pouring out everything I'd suppressed for 10 years. After I finished, the doctor was silent for a long time. Do you think Lucy is real? She finally asked. I know she is real, but I also know that all the evidence points to her not. So maybe I'm going crazy. What if you're not crazy? What if something else happened? I gave a bitter smile. Like what? She disappeared from reality? I traveled to a parallel universe? That's no different from admitting you have delusions. Memory is complex. Sometimes trauma represses memories, hiding them, making them inaccessible to our consciousness, but they still exist. Do you think I have repressed memories? I think it's worth exploring. Would you like to try hypnotherapy? I was so desperate, I was willing to try anything. The next session, The doctor dimmed the lights and had me lie on her sofa. She guided me into a hypnotic state with a low, rhythmic voice. I felt myself sinking, layers of consciousness overlapping, like sinking into deep water. Back to the bridge, she said. Back to that night with Lucy. Tell me what you saw. I was there, not remembering, experiencing. I was back to being 17 in my cheerleading outfit, with Lucy beside me. A thick fog rolled in, unsettlingly thick. But this time, I kept watching. This time, I ever get the moment Lucy's hand slipped from mine. I saw her being pulled back into the fog. I saw figures moving in the white, not supernatural, but human. I heard heavy, urgent voices. Got her. Was it really necessary? You know it was. Her father knows too much. He's been talking to that reporter. We can't risk it. Lucy screamed. I tried to reach her, but someone grabbed me from behind and held me rooted to the spot. She saw it. Someone said it was a woman's voice, familiar, but I couldn't place it. Give her the injection. Make her forget. A sharp pain shot through my arm. The world began to blur and distort. Jenny, listen carefully. The woman's voice rang out again, right next to my ear. You'll forget Lucy. She was never your friend. You don't know a Lucy Thompson at all. You crossed this bridge alone tonight. Can you say it again? I heard my own voice, muffled, distant, and far away. I crossed this bridge alone. Good girl. When you wake up tomorrow, it will all be like a nightmare. Lucy Thompson never existed. Her father never existed. None of this ever happened. That's better. Better for everyone, especially for you. The fog lifted. I stood alone on the other side of the bridge, now understanding why I collapsed, why my arm ached. In the doctor's office, I sobbed uncontrollably, my body trembling. What did you see? She asked softly. They took her. I gasped. They took Lucy and made me forget everything. Oh, God. They drugged me. They made me forget her. Who took her? I don't know. I couldn't see her face. But they knew her father. They said he spoke to a reporter, talked about something. Something they dared not risk. I sat bolt upright, a flood of possibilities rushing through my mind. They killed her, right? Because her father knew something. And then they made the whole town forget she existed. Jenny, you need to think carefully. The mass memory manipulation you described is scientifically impossible. But trauma can cause our brains to fabricate stories to explain things we don't understand. You think I'm making this up too. I think you've experienced something real and painful, and your brain is trying to process it. Hypnosis has helped you awaken a repressed memory, but we need to interpret it carefully. I have to go back, I interrupted her. I have to go back to Millbrook, back to that bridge. I don't think it's a good time to go back. You're vulnerable right now. But I had already stood up and grabbed my purse. 10 years. I'd spent 10 years thinking I was going crazy, thinking I was making up my best friend, but I wasn't. Lucy was real, and she'd been through terrible things. I needed to know the truth. I called George from the car. I have to go see my parents, I said. Could you babysit the kids for me tonight? Sure. Is everything all right? Did anything happen during therapy? I'm fine. I just need to talk to them. I'll explain when I get home. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my heart pounding, and drove toward Millbrook. The hypnosis seemed to awaken some kind of memory, fragments flooding back like a tide. Not just memories of Lucy, but also the expressions on my parents' faces that night. There was a hint of guilt in their eyes as they looked at me. Everyone in town quickly rallied, supporting one another. They knew. They all knew. As evening fell, I arrived on the outskirts of Millbrook. The town was as usual. Neat houses, tree-lined streets, and the white church steeple towering above the shops on the main street. Perfect. About 5 minutes from my parent house. I saw it, Old Miller Bridge. I hadn't planned to take this route. There was another way to my parents' house, completely avoiding the bridge. But for some reason, my car had brought me here, as if drawn by a force I couldn't understand. Just then, I saw the fog. The fog was rising. Thick white fog drifted from the stream below, eerily suffocating. I gasped, I pulled the car over, got out, and stared blankly. Then it dawned on me. 20 years had passed since that night, and 20 years since it appeared. It's back. I should have kept driving. I should have gone to my parents' house, confronted them, and demanded to know what had happened to Lucy. That was my original plan. That's why I drove here. But I couldn't stop staring at the fog, couldn't stop thinking about the legend, the fog that appears every 20 years. That song that supposedly allows you to travel between two worlds. What if it's all true? What if that night, Lucy and I really did travel to another world, a world where she never existed, a world where her father never existed, a world where the secret they'd always kept never existed? Threatened? If that's the case, if I really did travel between two worlds, maybe I could go back. I started walking toward the bridge, my hands trembling. The rational part of me, the part that studied neuroscience with George, that part that built evidence-based medicine systems, was screaming at me to stop. This is madness. Fog is just fog. Parallel universes don't exist. I'm breaking down. I need a turn of help. But another part of me, the part that never stopped believing in Lucy, the sound grew louder. I stepped onto the bridge. The fog immediately surged up, enveloping my ankles, waist, and chest. The same biting cold. The same thick, vibrant texture. The world behind me vanished instantly. I couldn't see the town. I couldn't see my car. Nothing but white. My heart pounded, and I felt like I was about to faint. I started walking forward, my arms outstretched. I groped my way along the railing. Then I started singing. My voice sounded strange in the fog, muffled and distant. I kept walking, kept singing, trying to remember all the lyrics. Lucy and I had learned this song in elementary school music class. I couldn't remember why we learned it. The fog grew thicker, heavier. I couldn't feel the bridge beneath my feet anymore. I felt nothing but the sensation of falling, a feeling of being destroyed and rebuilt. The last verse. I sang the last syllable, my voice choking at the final word. Then only silence, cold and white, remained. Then the fog lifted. I stood on the other side of the bridge, under the streetlights, on the maple-lined avenue. But everything was wrong. Not the kind of catastrophic, earth-shattering thing. Not the kind of obvious, glaring thing. Just 1,000 subtle things hinted at something amiss. The streetlights were the same ones, but for some reason, they were new. The paint fresh, not peeling. The houses in the distance were a different color. And the cars parked in the driveway were different. The air smelled different too, fresher, with a faint floral scent I couldn't quite place. Lucy was standing under the streetlight, wearing the exact same cheerleading outfit I'd worn 10 years ago. "Jenny!" She rushed over and grabbed my hand. Her face was exactly as I remembered. 17, vibrant, real. "Oh my God, where did you go? You just vanished. 1 second you were beside me. The next you were gone." I was terrified. I couldn't say a word. I couldn't breathe. I just stood there, staring blankly at her, tears streaming down my face. "Jenny, are you all right? Did you hit your head? The way you're looking at me is so strange." Her face was full of worry. I finally found my voice, though it was a whisper. "Lucy, you're here. You're real." Of course I'm real. What happened? What happened in the fog? How long have you been gone? How long? I asked, half crying, half laughing. How long have I been gone? I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, but it felt like forever. I couldn't see you and I couldn't hear you. I thought you'd fallen off the bridge, or... She stopped. I looked down at myself. I was wearing my cheerleading uniform, the blue and gold Millbrook High School uniform, with my name embroidered on the front. My legs were bare in the November wind. On my feet were the worn white Nike sneakers I'd worn to practice that night, tied with blue laces. I slowly raised my left hand, terrified of what I would see. No ring. My fingers were bare, smooth, young. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." My hands trembled as I touched my cheeks. The skin felt different, smoother, firmer. I pulled out my phone, the phone that should have held photos of Sarah and Michael, George's text messages, and all the electronic records of my life. It was the iPhone 5S I'd sold. The lock screen showing a picture of myself at 17, grinning at the camera, wearing the same cheerleading outfit. The date was November 15th, 2015. Jenny, you scare me to death. Lucy grabbed my arm. Come on, we'll walk you home. Maybe you're having another panic attack. My dad says stress can make people do weird things. Your dad. I looked up at her, clinging to this detail as if it were a lifeline. Lucy, what does your dad do? Does he work? He's a dental assistant at Dr. Morrison's clinic. You know, you've always known. Are you sure you didn't bump your head in the fog? A dental assistant, I repeated. Not a homeless man, not the bad guy everyone was whispering about. Just a dental assistant. Yeah, he works for Dr. Morrison, the dentist on the street. He's probably still there packing up. He usually doesn't get home until late. Lucy spoke quickly, sounding a little nervous, trying to break the silence, while I just stood there, staring at my bare hands. Come on, Lucy said, tugging at my arm. I'll take you home. Your mother knows what to do. I let her lead me down the bridge and through streets that looked almost exactly like the Millbrook I knew, but with some differences. A house painted yellow instead of blue. A car that shouldn't be there. A slightly different street sign. We walked in silence, Lucy glancing at me anxiously every few seconds. I couldn't utter a word. Or had I really been here before? Maybe this was my original world. Maybe the past 10 years, George, the children, the life I built, it was all an illusion. Maybe that night 10 years ago, I crossed that road and now, I finally found my way home. But if that's the case, where is George? Where are my children? We arrived at my parents' house, or rather, a version of it. Same address, same basic structure, only the blinds were blue instead of white. A different car was parked in the driveway, a silver sedan. Someone I didn't recognize. Lucy walked me to the door and rang the doorbell. My mother opened the door, and I almost collapsed to the floor in relief. She looked exactly the same. Maybe a little younger than the last time I saw her, but her eyes were still gentle, her smile still warm. She didn't get cancer when I had my first child. She didn't die. Jenny? Lucy? I thought you went straight to Lucy's after practice. She looked me over carefully, her smile a little stiff. Honey, are you all right? You don't look good. She was acting a bit strange since the bridge, Lucy explained. I think the fog scared her. She's been behaving really oddly lately. Come in. I'll make some hot chocolate. Mom placing a warm hand on my back. The house felt both familiar and strange. The layout was the same. The basic furniture was the same, but some small details were different. The curtains were different. The paintings on the walls were different. I flipped through my photos, trying to piece together what my life in this world was really like. In one elementary school photo, I was grinning with gaps between my teeth. In a middle school photo, I was wearing braces, looking a little clumsy. And in a high school photo, I was wearing a cheerleader uniform. Lucy was next to me, and we were both making faces. But then nothing happened. No college graduation photos. No wedding photos. No pictures of grandchildren for my parents to be proud of. I had to tell myself it was because none of that had happened yet. I was only 17, still in high school. It was just the beginning of my life. Mom brought us steaming hot chocolate, made the same way I did as a child, with extra marshmallows and a candy cane stirring. That familiar sweetness made my throat tighten. Well, Mom sat down across from us and asked, "What happened?" "We were crossing the bridge," Lucy said. "The fog came in really thick, Mrs. Patterson. You should see." Jenny's terrified. She's starting to ask strange questions, like she doesn't know where she is. "I'm fine." I managed to say, "It's just the fog is terrifying. That's all." Mom reached out and touched my forehead. "You don't have a fever, but you look tired. Honey, when was the last time you had a good night's sleep?" I wanted to say 6 months ago, before the nightmare started. Before I started seeing a therapist. Before I remembered what happened to Lucy, except that it didn't happen here. Here, Lucy is fine. Here, Lucy never disappeared. I'm fine. I changed my tune. Just a little tired. Then you should go to bed early. You have school tomorrow. Mom glanced at her watch. Your dad will be home soon, too. He's still tutoring students at the high school. I froze, my cup still raised to my lips. Dad tutoring students? Yes, honey. He goes every Tuesday night. You know that. Mom smiled lovingly. That's the downside of being a teacher, isn't it? The work is never-ending. He always has to stay behind to help students who are struggling or take homework home to grade. But he enjoys it. A teacher. In this world, my father is a teacher. In my other world, the place I've lived for the past 10 years, my father was a policeman. I remember him in his uniform, the static from his radio, and the way he worked late into the night. But here, he's a teacher, a high school teacher, often staying late to tutor students. Everything has changed. Not just Lucy, not just her father. Everything has changed. Does your dad know where you are? Mom asked Lucy. Should I call him? He's still at the dentist, Lucy said, cleaning up the last patient's room. He told me he'd be home late. Your dad is such a hard worker, Mom said warmly. Dr. Morrison is so lucky to have someone like him. He's so kind to his patients, especially the anxious little ones. I stared at her because in my world, in my other world, Mom always deliberately avoided mentioning Lucy's father. She always seemed uncomfortable whenever his name was mentioned. But here, she spoke of him with genuine respect and warmth. I should go home, Lucy said, finishing her hot chocolate. Let Jenny rest. She didn't sleep well last night. She squeezed my hand. Text me later, okay? Let me know you're okay. Okay, I said, though I wasn't sure if I could still say okay. After Lucy left, Mom helped me upstairs to my room, my teenage bedroom, which I hadn't seen in 10 years. The same posters on the walls, the same plush toys on the bed, my cheerleading trophy on the shelf. Everything seemed frozen in the past. Sleep well, Jen Jen, Mom said, kissing my forehead. Everything will be all right tomorrow. But as she closed the door, I sat on that narrow single bed, and I thought, I have to know if George is still here. I pulled out my phone, this old phone. I opened the browser. My hands trembled so badly I could barely type. I searched for George Henn, the man I married, my children's father, the one who stood by me through my nightmares, the one who built my life with me. With me, no results. I tried again, adding his middle school and his elementary school. The silly YouTube singing account he used to have as a teenager. Still no results. I expanded my search to other cities and other states. Maybe he lived somewhere in the world. But the more I searched, the clearer it became. I started searching for Lucy, searching for Michael, searching for my children, searching for my babies, searching for the two people I loved most of my life. Nothing. Obviously nothing. I sat in my teen bedroom, wearing perfume-scented pajamas, wondering if I was home or if I had left home. Story 3. Baby Blue, Blue Baby. I always knew Claythorne Boarding School was old, but it never felt ancient until that night. The night Adelaide convinced us to try the Blue Baby ritual. Maybe it was the way the wind rattled the windows, or the way the hallway lights flickered as if trying to warn us. Or maybe it was just the way Adelaide smiled when she suggested we break into the girls' bathroom after curfew. Her smiles always meant trouble. We slipped inside and locked the door behind us. The metallic click of the lock echoed far too loudly in the tiled room. All lights off, Elliot reminded us, already sounding nervous. Cameron flipped the switch, plunging everything into solid blackness. Darkness. So complete, I couldn't see my own hand in front of my face. I felt the others shift around me, trying to find their marks by memory. The bathroom mirror stretched across the wall like a portal, faintly reflecting what scraps of moonlight squeezed through the frosted window. In that dimness, we formed a crooked line before it, 4 silhouettes in a row. My voice trembled before I even spoke. I still think this is a bad idea. Cameron bumped my shoulder. Rosabella, relax. It's just a dumb school legend. Yeah, Adelaide chimed in, her tone too excited. Besides, we're all doing it together. Nothing bad's gonna happen. That was the first lie of the night. We lifted our arms into the ritual pose, as though rocking invisible babies. My elbows trembled slightly. I hope no one noticed. Elliot cleared his throat. Okay, he whispered. Remember, don't fumble the chant. 13 times. Perfectly. My heart thudded. I could feel it in my teeth. We faced a mirror and began. Baby blue, blue baby. The chorus sounded wrong in the dark. Too unified, too hollow. As we chanted, faint outlines of our reflections took shape, like they were surfacing slowly from underwater. Baby blue, blue baby. Every time the phrase left my lips, the dark seemed to thicken. The air grew colder, heavy with something that didn't feel like air at all. Baby blue, blue baby. Around the 9th repetition, I felt Cameron shift beside me. Rosabella, he whispered. You're shaking. I'm fine. I lied. We finished the 13th chant together, the final words dissolving into the stale bathroom silence. Then came the moment no one prepared me for. At first, it felt like a faint pressure on my forearms, like someone had placed a bundle of cloth across them. The weight grew heavier, colder, until goosebumps crawled to the back of my neck. Elliot gasped, "Oh my God!" She has it. Look. I didn't want to look. I refused to look, but the mirror forced me to. Reflected there, barely visible in the dim glow, was a bluish lump in my arms. Not quite shaped like a baby, but shifting, pulsing faintly as if something inside it breathed. My throat dried instantly. Adelaide whispered, "Holy crap, Rosabella, you're holding it." The thing moved. I nearly screamed. Its tiny fingers curled around my wrist like threads of ice. My knees almost buckled. The rules echoed in my mind. Flush the baby. Get rid of it before the mother comes. I stumbled backward until I hit the toilet stall door. My hand shook wildly as I pushed it open. The weight in my arms grew denser, more solid, like real flesh. Something cold brushed my cheek. I lifted the lid, swallowing a sob. If I hesitated, even for a second, bang! A fist slammed against the bathroom door from the outside. Who's in there? A teacher's voice cut sharply through the dark. The overhead lights burst on with a harsh electric buzz, and the baby vanished. The weight disappeared, so suddenly I lurched forward. The four of us screamed in overlapping panic. The teacher shoved the door open, face tight with fury. "What are you doing in here? It's nearly midnight." Her voice sounded far away, because over her shoulder, the mirror caught my attention. At first, I thought the lighting had done something strange to our reflections, but then I saw her, just behind us, standing in the mirror, a woman, pale skin stretched taut over sharp cheekbones, wet, stringy hair dripping onto her gown, eyes sunken, dark, burning with a mother's grief and rage. Her mouth hung slightly open, as though mid-scream, though no sound escaped. She stared directly at me. I blinked. She was gone. Adelaide grabbed my wrist, dragging me out of the bathroom before the teacher could scold us further. The hallway felt too bright, too quiet, too normal. But as we hurried away, something icy brushed the back of my neck, like a hand reaching for what I had taken, what I had tried to flush away. I didn't look back. I didn't have to, because in every reflective surface we passed, every window, every glass trophy case, I caught glimpses of her pale figure just behind us. The ghost mother was following, and she wasn't going to stop. Story 4. I cheated a suicide demon out of life. Now it's coming for me. I climb skyscrapers. I'm a window washer. I do office buildings, high rises, places like that, and I've seen things through those windows you wouldn't believe. Nudity, fistfights, drug use, you name it. It's all part of the job. I've learned, when you catch someone who thinks no one's watching, that's when you see them for who they really are. Still, having said that, nothing trumps what I saw yesterday. Nothing. This is what happened. Me and a trainee were 70 stories high, washing the window of this little girl's bedroom. This was a luxury high-rise, very high dollar. Inside, I couldn't help but notice this man hugging his daughter. She might have been 5 or 6. Neither of them saw us. Once he let her go, he put up a hand, like he was telling her not to follow. He turned, walked out the door, and shut it behind him. There was an adjacent window. Inside was the man's living room with the kitchen behind it. The man walked across the living room and over to a bookshelf. He gripped it and walked backwards with it until it blocked the girl's door in her room. The girl eyed the door, holding her teddy bear by the arm. She'd heard all that noise. She was clearly confused, and so were we. The man marched back into his living room and jabbed a finger into an empty corner. He hissed at it, like he was really giving someone a piece of his mind, but nobody was there. Then he went into the kitchen, snatched a bar stool from the counter, brought it back into the living room, and placed it underneath the ceiling fan. Come on, what's with this guy? He went back to the kitchen, this time digging through a drawer. He pulled out a piece of paper and a brand new teddy bear with a tag clipped on its ear. He dropped the paper on the counter. Then he glanced over at his daughter's bedroom, kissed the teddy bear, and set it on top of the paper. He reached back into that same drawer, deeper this time. When his hand came out, it held on to a long rope with loop tied on each end. He walked into the living room, nice and slow, dragging himself along, like he didn't want to go through with whatever he was doing. In the bedroom, the girl pushed the door. It smacked against the bookshelf. She pushed harder, and once it smacked again, she realized she was trapped. She slapped on the door, screamed so loudly we heard her through an inch of glass. The man balanced himself on the stool. When he heard his girl, his face tightened, like his heart was being squeezed by the sound of her voice. He glared back into that same corner, shouted something I couldn't make out. Then he fastened the rope tight around the ceiling fan. He fastened the other end around his neck. My trainee, who I just called Kid, was yelling, pounding on the glass, shaking our basket around. I gripped onto the railing. Our basket was no bigger than an elevator. It hung by 2-point suspension, connecting to a crane on top of the building. We dangled over an 800-foot drop. With all that banging around, the man snapped his head up, wide-eyed. "Come on, man," the kid was yelling. "Don't do it." The man shook his head. He scooted forward, nudging his toes off the edge of the stool, 1 inch at a time. If I didn't do something, he'd kill himself. I had to get his attention back. I grabbed my squeegee, flipped it on its metal handle, and hammered the glass. The loud crack jolted his eyes back up. Skyscraper glass is too thick to shatter, but at least I had him back. I pointed to his daughter's bedroom. Without making a sound, I mouthed the words, "What about her?" The man froze. He glanced toward the bedroom, pressed his lips together, then looked back at me with tears in his eyes. For a second, I thought he felt ashamed. But then he looked at the empty corner again and shouted that he was sorry. My blood ran cold. "Frank," the kid whispered, "are you seeing this?" I saw. The man had reached his breaking point. Whatever he was seeing had him convinced. He faced forward, shut his eyes. The legs of the stool wobbled. He was fighting against his reflexes, trying to force his legs to kick over the stool, 1 small step from snapping his neck. But then he stepped back. He reached up, lifted the rope from his neck, and stepped down. The girl screamed again for her father. He slouched onto the stool and leaned on his elbows. He studied his hands, which were visibly shaking. Then he sank his face into them. "Get us back up," I told the kid. "I'm calling the cops." While the kid controlled the basket, I dialed 911. 3/4 of the way up, right when the operator connected, the kid stopped the basket. We swayed from the impact and slapped the window. I stared at the kid. "Operator, please state your emergency." "Kid," I said, "come on. There's a little girl stuck in there with a lunatic. Get moving." A rush of wind blew by and whistled on the side of the building. The basket rocked and swayed. The kid was looking down over the edge. Slowly, he raised his eyes to meet mine, blinked a few times, and shook his head, giving off a little smile. "Sorry, Frank." He resumed the lift. At the top, the cops were already waiting for us. I gave an approximate location of the apartment, and a group of them raced inside. A younger cop stayed behind and asked for my statement. I blocked the wind with my hand, lit a cigarette, and told him everything. The rope, the girl, all of it. The cop then asked the kid, "Did you witness the same sequence of events, sir?" "Not exactly," the kid said. "Huh, what possibly could I have left out?" I saw it all in my head, like a picture. The cop flipped his notepad to the next page. "All right, what would you like to add?" "There was also a woman," he said. "She might have been in her 70s or 80s. While he tried to hang himself, she stood in the corner, smiling. What the hell's the matter with you?" I asked. That apartment had two people, the man and his daughter. You know that. I'm only telling you what I saw. The cop studied us, his eyes snapping between me and the kid. Obviously one of us was lying when he opened his mouth to speak. Someone spoke on his walkie-talkie instead, a string of police codes, then a demand for an immediate response. The cop hesitated. He didn't want to go, but he pocketed his pen and pad and said, "We'll be in touch." The door slammed shut, bouncing a metallic clang off nearby buildings. Then we were alone again. Well, the kid said, "There's no sense in waiting around. Ready to get back to it?" He pointed at the basket, sitting at the edge of the rooftop. He was too casual, like he didn't just witness a near suicide and lie his ass off to a cop. "I think you should go home, kid." "But we're not finished." "Why would I do that?" I dropped my cigarette on the ground and smushed it out. "Because you're not well. Go on. I'll finish up. This is my job too, Frank. Don't worry. You can still log your hours. I won't tell no one." "Now, Frank," he said, "if I left early my first week, how would that make me look?" "I don't care how you look. I don't like you. I don't trust you. I am not getting back in that basket with you." "Well, do you plan on cleaning any more windows today? If so, I'm afraid you'll have to." I got in the kid's face. "You want me to tell Howard how you just tinker with the truth? If not, turn around and walk out that door." "Sure, go ahead. Actually, here, I can call him up for you." The kid dug into his pocket. He pulled out his phone and started scrolling. "Because you see the problem, right? Howard can't fire me for something he wasn't here to see." However, he flipped his phone around. It was a picture of me nipping a flask on my lunch break. My stomach dropped. This is what they call concrete evidence. Then he flipped to Howard's contact and hovered his thumb over the call button. "Do you want to call? Say the word Frank and I'll call." I could have hit him. Right there. "Go. Just go. Get in the basket." "Whoa, whoa, whoa," the kid said. "Hold your horses." He slipped his phone back in his pocket and strolled over to the AC unit where his backpack was leaning. He dug around. His body blocked whatever he was doing, so I couldn't see what he was grabbing. I came up behind him, but the kid must have heard me. He stood up real fast. He was holding a sandwich, like this was a good time for a lunch break, like he wasn't doing anything wrong. Something sparked in me. I palmed that sandwich, wound back, and pitched it off the edge of the skyscraper. It turned into a little white speck against the clear blue sky. Then I looked the kid dead in the eye, waiting for him to try something. See what happened. The kid's gaze followed it down hundreds of feet. He whistled. "Boy, it sure is a long way down. Isn't it, Frank?" He brushed past me, opened the gate of the basket, and stepped inside. I followed, ready for this day to be over. Window washers wear vests with a ring on the back. A harness hooks onto that ring and attaches to the roof. God forbid something should happen to the basket. It's a last line of defense. While I hooked in, the kid just stood there. "What?" I said. "Need me to hold your hand?" The kid laughed. He grabbed his harness and took his sweet time hooking in. Then he glanced at the control panel. "Do you want to take us back down? You're good right where you are." "All right then, Frank, down we go." I powered on the crane and lifted us several feet above the roof. Then I eased the control stick forward, nudging the basket off the edge, putting hundreds of feet of open air beneath us. The wind picked up again, rocking the basket back and forth. The kid stuck his hands inside his pockets. We descended in total silence, listening to cables groan. Rush hour traffic race below. The sun low in the sky, splashed bright orange across the windows. When we reached the apartment, I glanced inside. It was empty. No father, no little girl, but the chair still sat on the fan, and the rope still hung above it. I couldn't take it no more. I needed answers. All right, you gotta tell me. Why'd you make that stuff up? I didn't make anything up, but there is something I left out. He slipped a pair of box cutters from his pocket. He squeezed a button, and the blade flicked out. All right, kid, just take it easy. He grinned, flashing me a set of crooked teeth. You see her now, don't you? See who? Look inside. I did not want to take my eyes off those box cutters, so I only took a quick peek. What? It's an empty apartment. The kid shook his head. That is incredible. She is staring right at you, right on the other side of the window. You don't hear her screaming. I placed my hand on the controls. Look, I think we should head back. We're not going back, he said. The blade glinted in the sunlight. Listen to me. I am not a threat to you. Let's just talk about whatever this is. Sure, Frank. We'll talk. But first, there's something I need to ask you. Ask anything. Would you reach up behind you and unhook your harness? The kid had lost his mind. His eyes had this stone-cold look. He was dead serious. That's a safety violation, I said. I know. I've paid attention during training. But this is a debt that we both have to pay. My God, the kid wanted both of us to jump. Whatever delusions a man in the apartment had, the kid now had them too. And like the man, I happen to know that the kid also had a family, a wife and a little girl of his own. I dropped my voice. Answer me this. When your little girl is waiting for you at the door tonight and you don't come home, how do you think she's going to feel? Probably about the same as your wife, he said, shifting the blade from my stomach to my neck. Last chance, Frank. Are you going to jump? I took a glance down. Down 70 stories. Down 800 feet. Down to rush hour traffic so far away. It looked like a line of ants. Please, I said, don't do this. The kid exhaled, shut his eyes, and reopened them. He removed the blade from my neck and pushed past me. He moved to the end of the basket and gripped the cable and started cutting. I took one step toward him, then heard a loud pop. A spray of liquid hissed from where he'd cut. I couldn't believe it. He'd severed the hydraulic line. Then I felt a bang. The basket dipped at a sharp angle. I slid down, striking against the gate and the kid. We both scrambled, fighting to plant our feet on the gate and get upright. I had a railing on my left. He had a railing on his right. We stood up, shoulder to shoulder, in the narrow width of the basket, each gripping the railing on our own side. I looked over at the kid. His eyes were already on me. Without breaking eye contact, he reached down and opened the gate under our feet. My cable caught my weight, and my feet dangling into nothing. I hugged the railing tighter. I glanced down and saw an open ocean of air. Please, I begged, just stop. The kid was hooking his feet onto the railing, trying to achieve some type of stability. Then his hands left the railing, reached above me, and snipped my line. The weight of my entire body dropped into the grip of my hands. Now I dangled freely, with no harness. Hydraulic fluid rained down, slicking the railing. My fingers were losing their grip. I hugged the railing tighter. Come on, Frank, the kid said. Let go already. I could no longer speak. I just nodded my head. I felt the kid's hand grip my shoulder, then push down. I slid down a couple inches, the railing screeching under my fingers. A cool rush of wind brushed against my legs. Here's the issue, Frank. If you don't choose to fall, it's not suicide. It's murder, and she doesn't want murder, so you have to make the choice. Then I felt his blade edging into the crevice between my head and right ear. But I can make your choice real easy. You want that? Is that what you want, Frank? I had never been so close to death. Every muscle inside my body tightened with fear. Then, out of nowhere, my mind pitched an idea. The kid was covered in hydraulic fluid. Hydraulic fluid is flammable. There was a lighter in my pocket. If I could make him cut his own line, I could torch him off the basket. But if he saw me going for the light, I was finished. I kicked my feet up, working to plant them on the inner lip of the basket. That exertion added strain to my hands and wrists. They began to tremble. "Help me," I said. "I'll do it, but first help me." His hand gripped the back of my shirt and lifted. My foot found the lip, giving immediate relief to my hands. His knife slid into my ear a little deeper. "Do you need a count of 3? "Just wait," I said, trying to catch my breath. "I have a condition." "What condition?" "That we both go at the same time." A trickle of blood ran down my neck. "Come on, Frank. Don't try to trick me." "No tricks," I said. "If you don't come with me, I choose no. You cut all you want. But unless we both jump, I choose no." The kid went quiet. Several seconds passed. Then the blade lifted from my ear. I peeked over. The kid hugged the railing, fixing to cut his own line. His eyes were still on me. I held the railing tight with my right hand, with the left hand behind my body. I brought it down, praying he wouldn't notice. "Wait," he said. "Why are you looking at me like that?" He snipped his line. "Because, kid, this face is the last one you're ever going to see." I closed my fingers on the lighter. "That goes for both of us," he said. "I'm going to jump onto you now, Frank. Then we're both going to fall. Are you ready for that?" "Uh-huh." The kid turned his body fully toward me, ready to jump. Then his eyes caught my hand. I punched it under his chin and clicked on the flame. His skull erupted into a burst of fire. He stuck out his hands to latch onto me, but I stuck out my leg and pumped him one in the stomach. He crumpled up and slipped off the basket, plunging into thin air. I hung there another 30 minutes before rescue came. While I waited, I must have started hallucinating, because I could have sworn I heard a woman screaming. Then the firefighters came. They cut a hole through the glass and pulled me in. From then on, disturbing things have been happening. While my wife drove me home, she asked for my permission to swerve into head-on traffic. That same night, I woke up to my 16-year-old son dousing me and my wife with gasoline. Then he asked for my permission to light a match. Now I'm sitting on the edge of a skyscraper with my feet hanging off the edge. This entity is real. I know it is, because it's inside the heads of my entire family. It's torturing me, tearing me down by using the people I love the most. It feeds on my pain and suffering, and it wants me to make a choice. After careful consideration, I think I've reached one. Story 5. I went hiking to look for my missing dad. I should have never gone up that mountain. My father and I loved hiking, not the casual kind. The kind where the air thins, where the wind feels like knives and every step burns. He used to say the cold, wash the noise off his mind. I never understood that until I was older. That day was supposed to be one of those days. We had a cabin we always used as a starting point. Same place every time. Same routine. Coffee, map check, climb. But when I got there, he wasn't. At first, I didn't panic. The road up the mountain gets icy, and the forest can swallow sound. I figured he got held up, but an hour passed. Then 2. I called him. No answer. I called again. Nothing. My father was a serious man, scheduled, strict, always early. His missing a planned hike wasn't just unlike him, it was impossible. I stayed in that cabin for 6 days. I must have called his phone 7 times a day. Eventually, I realized I wasn't calling to reach him. I was calling just to hear the ringing. If the line was still live, then maybe he was too. I should have called 911 immediately. But fear makes you stupid. Fear makes you small. So I did the only thing that felt real. I followed the plan. I went to the mountain. I started climbing. Something was wrong the moment I stepped onto the trail. The air wasn't just cold, it was dead. No birds, no insects, no rustling leaves. Just the crunch of frost under my boots. The world felt like it was holding its breath. Halfway up, the sun slipped behind the ridge. The trees stretched long, Thin shadows across the path. Everything dim. I checked my watch, too late to keep going. I found a flat ledge near a stone outcrop and set up camp. That's when I found the first bone. Not small, not an animal. Something long, thick, snapped clean down the center. The marrow was hollowed out. The white is stained brown and flaking. Something had eaten it. Recently, the bone was still wet. My chest tightened. It looked human, but it couldn't be. My father was strong, unbreakable. What did you get yourself into, Dad? Sleep never came. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw his breath in the cold, heard him laughing on the trail. And beneath that memory, something hungry, something waiting. Then I heard it, movement in the brush. Slow at first, then heavier, closer, then his voice. Son, I've been waiting up here. Took your sweet time. For a moment, I almost unzipped the tent. But the voice was off, too loose, too soft. My father always spoke like he was cutting through stone. This voice sagged, melted. I unzipped the tent just an inch. A figure stood in the dark. Wrong size, wrong shape, a foot too tall, limbs too long, and above its shoulders, a deer skull. Before I could react, something slashed. The tent tore open. Claws ripped across my arm. I felt blood soak into my sleeve, hot against the cold air. I screamed and threw myself out onto the frozen ground. I ran, blind, panicked, feet pounding the trail, breath burning my throat. I didn't realize I was running up the mountain, not down, until the trees thinned and cold stars opened overhead. The summit. I was bleeding, dizzy, no cover, no way to hide. Then I heard it again. Son. It stepped into view. A towering skeletal body, skin stretched thin over bone, a massive deer skull for a head, antlers branching like black lightning, but its mouth, too human, moved beneath the bone. You shouldn't have run. I'm hungrier now. It charged. I curled up, arms over my head, bracing for the strike. But when it hit me, it didn't break me. I was heavier than expected. I felt it lose footing. Saw the antlers tilt, claws scraping rock. Then it fell. I heard it tumbling, branches snapping, stone cracking, then silence. I never checked if it survived. I just kept walking until I saw headlights. A ranger's truck, a real voice. I never saw my father again. I still hike. It's the only place I feel close to him. But I won't go back to that mountain. Not yet. Maybe one day. When I'm ready, I'll go back and talk to him. Story 6. My best friend and I use a Ouija board. We found out what happens when you don't say goodbye. We were so stupid. My childhood best friend, Lily, and I had managed to find a Ouija board in a Halloween store. We were the type of middle school girls to wear all black and think we were cool for listening to underground metal bands. So naturally, we had to cross contacting a spirit off of our bucket list. I didn't think we'd actually manage to reach anything. Ouija boards are mass manufactured by Hasbro. For fuck's sake, no way they'd actually work, right? I was dead wrong. Lily was the one who set everything up. Her parents were more laid back than mine were. Mom and Dad already weren't fans of my heavy black eyeliner and crummy attitude. So bringing a Ouija board into their home sounded like a great way to get myself grounded. Lily's house was a natural choice. Lily ushered me into her room the second I stepped through the door. Her excitement was bubbling over. She clearly put a lot more stock into the paranormal than I did. I've been waiting for this all week, she said, an eager glint in her eyes. I'm pumped. This is really something, I replied, drinking in my surroundings. Dusk wasn't for another 3 hours. But Lily's room was dark as pitch. Thick blankets were hung over the windows, despite the fact that she already had blackout curtains. A circle of candles glowed on the floor, acting as our only light source. The Ouija board sat in the center of the room like a crown jewel. Something about the whole setup made me uneasy. Come, sit, Lily said, claiming her spot to the right of the board. I did as I was told, taking a seat opposite her. "Put your hand on the planchette," she demanded, her gleeful demeanor melting into one of stern determination. Truthfully, she was beginning to frighten me, but I didn't tell her that. Instead, I followed her orders and placed my hand beside hers. "Hello, spirits. Is anyone in the room with us?" Her call was met with a lingering silence. "Is anyone there? Anyone from the other side?" Nothing. Just another moment of tension before she called out again. "If anyone can hear me, give me a sign." "Lily, I don't think this is Dash." The planchette suddenly began to move. It rapidly shifted, first to the letter H, then to E, L, and O. "Hello." My blood turned to ice. "Lily, this isn't funny. Stop moving the planchette." I'm not." She failed to meet my gaze. I knew just by the tone of her voice that she was telling the truth. "Who are you?" Lily continued, a slight tremor in her voice. The planchette began to move again. "SM, nice to meet you, Sam," Lily said, regaining some of her prior confidence. "I'm going to ask you some questions, if that's okay." The planchette shifted to yes. "When were you born?" 1-8-4-3. "When did you die?" 1-8-6-2. "That's really young." "Were you killed?" "Yes." "By who?" EVRY1E. Lily and I shared a glance. I was terrified to know where this was going, but a morbid curiosity gnawed at me. I decided to ask a question of my own. "By everyone, do you mean the whole town? Were you hung?" The planchette darted aggressively as soon as the question left my lips. Yes, yes, yes. I could feel the color drain from my face. Lily asked a question that I couldn't bring myself to. "What did you do?" There was a pause before the planchette began to move. MURDR. At that moment, I made one of the stupidest decisions of my life. I stood up. "Lily, I can't do this anymore. I want to stop," I said, taking my hand off the planchette and rising to my feet on shaky legs. Lily didn't have time to respond. We could only watch in horror as the candles began to extinguish on their own, one by one. Only the one between us stayed lit, its flame dancing weakly. My bottom lip trembled, and I could feel tears welling up. Lily was frozen with fear, her eyes locked on me. And then, the last candle was snuffed out, plunging us into darkness. We screamed, ran for the door, and raced out the house and into the light. If anyone else had been home, they would have thought we'd lost our minds. The pair of us collapsed on the front lawn, tears streaming down our cheeks. We stayed there for a long time, letting the adrenaline rush fade. Once the fear dissipated, we stood, shared a glance, and walked back inside, turning on all the lights in the house until Lily's parents got home. I kept my mouth shut about the incident. Mom and Dad would have gone berserk if they'd known I'd been messing with a Ouija board. But staying quiet became harder and harder to do when strange things started occurring around the house. One night, I woke up with weird bruises on my wrist. Then my things started to go missing, only to reappear hours later, right where I'd left them. Words began appearing on the bathroom mirror unprompted. "Hello, I see you. No escape." After nearly a week, it was clear that the odd occurrences were taking a toll on me. I could barely manage to get a wink of sleep, and my grades suffered as a result. A few of my classmates even commented about how tired I looked. I had to do something. So I called Lily, the only person I could confide in. "Hey," she said from the other end of the line. "Hey, how are you holding up?" There was a pause. "Hannah, I'm scared. Really weird stuff has been happening, and I just don't know what to do." Her voice was tinged with a mixture of exhaustion and fear. My heart sank for her. But a small part of me was glad to have someone who knew what I was going through. "We'll figure out how to get rid of this thing. Ask your parents if I can spend the night tomorrow. It'll all be okay." I heard a sniffle. "I will. I really hope you're right." The next day, I found myself standing on Lily's front porch ringing the doorbell. After a few seconds, Lily appeared behind the screen door. She was sickly and pale with deep purple bags under her eyes. She'd obviously had it worse than I did. "My parents won't be home tonight," she said, allowing me into the house. "They're at a concert a few hours away." I nodded as I followed Lily down the hall to her room. Once we got there, I noted that it was a stark contrast from my previous visit. All the lights were on, the curtains were open, and the Ouija board was nowhere in sight. "So, I don't think you're gonna like this," I said, wringing my hands. "I know I don't, but we're going to need to use the Ouija board again." Lily's eyes grew wide. "I don't want to do that," she said, averting her gaze. "I don't either, but I think we need to say goodbye to Sam. That's probably the only way to get rid of him." Lily paused. I could tell that she was turning my words over in her head. "Okay," she said, the stern determination overtaking her expression. "I'll do whatever it takes to get this thing to leave." Moments later, the Ouija board was set up. We didn't bother with the candles or turning out the lights. Neither of us were comfortable with that. Lily seemed hesitant to start, so I took the lead as we placed our hands on the planchette. "Sam, are you in the room with us?" No response. I tried again. "Sam, we know you're in the room with us. Give us a sign that you can hear me." The planchette began to move. Hithere. My heart dropped. I didn't like that answer. "We need you to leave us alone. I'm going to say goodbye, and we're going to be done with you." The planchette angrily flew to the word no. No, no, no. Suddenly, the door to Lily's room slammed shut. She released a whimper and jumped instinctively. That was the worst thing she could have done, because she momentarily removed her hand from planchette. An overwhelming sense of dread settled into my stomach. The lights flickered, and the planchette began to move once again. My heart raced as it flew around the board, and my head felt heavy as it spelled another word. Nighd, Nighd. That's the last thing I remember before everything went black. I awoke lying face down on the carpet, a searing pain shooting through the flesh of my back. I ran my hands over my skin, and they came away red. My face drained the color. Lily, what the fuck happened?" I said, wincing as I rose to my feet. I received no response. Something was very wrong. I glanced around the room. When I found my best friend, I screamed. Lily was slumped against the wall, her eyes wide and unblinking. Her neck was stained a deep red. Written across her forehead were 3 letters that have haunted me for the rest of my life. "Sam." I scrambled to pull out my phone. I called the police, trying to feel Lily's neck for a pulse. She was cold to the touch. I was frantic when the operator picked up. 911, what is your emergency?" "Hello, my friend is hurt. I need help. Please send an ambulance right dash." In my frenzy, my eyes fell to the Ouija board, and the words caught in my throat. I found myself paralyzed with terror as the weight of it all crashed down on me. The blood-splattered planchette was sitting over the word goodbye. Story 7. A stranger joined our paranormal support group. He shouldn't have. I ignored the dead woman standing behind Pete. Well, tried to. I'd gotten pretty good at not looking at her. But not listening was another matter. Drip, drip, drip. Was it blood that perpetually rolled down her fingers? Or something worse? No way of knowing without looking. My eyes burned with the temptation to take a peek. Just a quick one. Surely it wouldn't do any. I blinked hard and focused on what Pete was saying. "No Shirley tonight. Kids have come down with the flu." I volunteered for setup duty. I gestured down the corridor. "Shall we?" I led the way, careful to keep my eyes away from windows, shiny doorknobs, unexpected puddles, anything that might cast a reflection. When we reached our room, I paused, casting Pete a sidelong look. "Do you want to?" He knew the drill. No setting foot in the room. Not yet. With exaggerated casualness, he leaned against the wall and fixed his eyes on the ceiling, while I opened the door and hurried inside. I fumbled the key into the storage cupboard lock and found what I needed within easy reach. Thank God for Shirley's organizational skills. All but sprinting back to the door, I uncorked the jar and drew a thick line of salt just inside the threshold. I caught the briefest glimpse of bare feet, bloated, the corpse white flesh shot through a blue. Dark, viscous liquid pooled around the rotting toes. Then Pete stepped over the salt and walked briskly to the storage cupboard, closing the door behind him with a firm click. That left me to deal with the blinds. It wasn't Pete's fault. It wouldn't be fair to expect him to do it. No amount of logic prevented the wave of resentment I felt as I wrestled with the ever-tangling cords, jaw clenched, waiting to hear. Tap, tap, tap. My mouth went dry. Just to my right, on the other side of the glass, was a glob of black ooze. And was that a fingernail? It's no wonder the cleaners hate us. The words erupted from my lips before I could stop them, followed by a giggle that sounded more like a shriek. Acknowledgement. Bad idea. But it broke the heavy silence of the room. Cleared my head long enough for me to win the battle with the blinds. With the outside world at last shut out, I allowed myself a moment, just long enough for my hands to stop trembling. By the time I made it back to the storage cupboard, I'd managed to plaster a smile onto my face. Pete had already retrieved his talisman. He sat cross-legged on the floor, gripping the dog-eared book so tightly his knuckles had turned white. When he heard the door open, he looked up expectantly. All clear, I confirmed. Rough week? I bit my tongue on the question as he scrambled to his feet. It seemed rude not to ask, particularly when the circles under his eyes were so much darker than usual. But now was not the time. Our first and most important rule made that clear. We dragged the chairs out in silence and set them in a circle in the middle of a room. Pete retrieved 5 thick white candles, one for each of us, and positioned them next to the chairs, while I retrieved the box of talismans. At the bottom was a jumble of metal tokens, symbols of a dozen different faiths. They were a hangover from the early days when it was just me and Shirley, fumbling our way through the darkness. None of our eventual regulars turned out to be particularly religious. Not even Stephen, our former man of the cloth. We all preferred something a little more personal. A teddy bear worn nearly threadbare. A near-full bottle of whiskey, a dog's rubber bone, imprinted with the tooth marks of its former owner. I dug out mine, a keyring bearing a photo of a seaside town, and pocketed it. The cat tree was too cumbersome for either of us to manage alone, so we wrestled that into position together before parting again to finish up. Pete conducted a thorough search of the room, rifling through every drawer and dropping to his knees to crawl beneath tables. We weren't the only ones who used this room. A compact mirror misplaced by the Knitting for Anxiety group could prove disastrous. While he did his rounds, I set out the laminated rule cards. By now, I knew them by heart, but I scanned through them nonetheless. As Shirley often told us, taking a couple of minutes to refresh our memories could save us a lifetime of suffering. 1. Discussion must not begin until all protective measures are in place. 2. 3. Any members with followers must not enter the room until the salt line has been drawn. 4. 5. Cover any reflective surfaces. 6. 7. Once the candles are lit, no one can leave until they have burned out. 8. 9. Don't be a dick. Everyone's stories are valid, even if they don't match your own. 10. 11. Listen when someone is talking. You'll have your own turn to speak. 12. 13. Keep an eye on Ed. 14. Daphne breathes in just as we finished, wearing her favorite fluffy pink jumper and carrying an enormous tin of biscuits. She gave Pete an assessing look before thrusting the tin into his arms. You're looking too thin. Eat, she ordered. She gave me a quick hug before scooping the teddy bear out of the talisman box, holding it in her lap as she plopped into one of the seats. Mary came next, scowling and sporting a livid black eye. Daphne made a little squeak of dismay. You poor love. What happened? She caught herself, clapping a hand over her mouth and staring wide-eyed around the rest of us. Don't worry, Mary reassured her. The fist that did this was human. Who would be daft enough to take a swing at you? I asked, incredulous. Short she might be, but when Mary wasn't running the pub, she was pitching in at her brother's farm, between hauling barrels and bales. Her arms might as well have been made of steel. Punter who'd had a few too many. She plucked the dog toy from the box, clenching her fist around it. The squeaker had long since died, but it emitted a sad puff of air. He's barred now. Just barred. I raised my eyebrows. The corners of her lips twitched. Maybe a bit bruised, too. Stephen arrived last, a few minutes after our designated start time. Sorry, he panted as he wrestled the Yowling carrier through the door. He did not want to cooperate tonight. He placed the carrier on the floor with a thud, opened the door, and beat a hasty retreat. Ed stalked out, tail twitching in irritation. He turned his baleful green eyes on Stephen, who held up his hands in surrender. Don't be a sourpuss, Daphne cooed. Poor old Stevie had to get you here somehow. All around the room, hands reached into pockets. They produced little chunks of cheese, cat biscuits, leftover scraps of chicken. Ed accepted our offerings like a king, receiving gifts from his subjects. Mollified, he allowed us to pet him for a minute before sauntering to the cat tree and cleaning the sleek black fur our filthy human hands had sullied. Right, I said, looking around the group. I think we're ready. Shall we make a start? My stomach churned with the usual mixture of anticipation and dread. I knew the others felt the same, but they moved to take their places nonetheless, Stephen grabbing the bottle of whiskey as he went. Okay, guys, I said, trying to ignore the feeling of wrongness as I took Shirley's usual seat. It didn't matter how many times I filled in for her. I'd never get used to it. If you need to go to the loo, make a cup of tea, whatever, now's the time. Once we light the candles. There's no getting up until they burn out. No one moved. Of course, they knew to come prepared. Pete, do you mind? He pulled a lighter from his jacket, lit his candle, and passed it to Mary. It did a full loop of the circle until it reached me. We're safe in the circle, I said as I lit my candle. Not just from the things that haunt us, but from each other. Remember, there's no judgment here. Listen, be kind to one another. Now, who would like to start? I glanced towards Pete, but he gave a tiny shake of his head, pressing his lips together tightly. Not ready yet. No matter. I turned instead to Stephen, who cleared his throat. I'll go, I suppose. He turned the bottle over in his hands. Danielle emailed me a few days ago. Danielle? Alfie's mom. Daphne ventured softly. The very same. She always gets in touch this time of year. Lets me know how he's getting on. History is his favorite subject. He'll be studying at uni in a couple of years. Thanks to you, said Mary. You gave him that chance. Pete, thumbing the edges of his book, added, you gave a lot of people chances. Stephen nodded. It's nice to hear about it. The life he might otherwise not have had. Nice to be reminded it's been another year since I chucked this in. He glanced down at the bottle, his grip tightening around its neck. But it's also a reminder that I'm not myself anymore, that I never will be again. His candle flickered, and for a moment, his shadow was not his own. It loomed on the wall behind him, its fingers growing, sharpening to points. The air grew heavy around us. Breathing was no longer an unthinking, natural process. It required conscious, painstaking effort. Behind me, on the cat tree, Ed let out a low growl. I glanced at the others in turn. Mary stared straight at Stephen, jaw clenched tight. Daphne held her teddy bear close to her chest. The circles under Pete's eyes looked darker than ever. Twisting a little in my chair, slowly, forcing myself to act as though I hadn't a care in the world, I looked over at Ed. He stared unblinking at the wall behind Stephen, tail snapping from side to side. Perhaps, Stephen's voice emerged a deep rasp. We should move on to someone else. Good idea. Through sheer force of will, I managed to keep my voice light. Sounds like you need a strepsil, mate. Mary snorted. Daphne looked at her like she'd lost her mind, then let out her own small giggle. Even Pete managed to smile. The oppressive feeling vanished as quickly as it had come. Ed resumed licking his paws. My turn, said Mary, drumming the rubber bone against her knee. The little git has been causing hell all week. He dashed. Before we could find out exactly what the little git had done, the door swung open. A bespectacled young man smiled in at us from the corridor. Is this the Stop Smoking group? They're in here tomorrow, I said. We're something else. Ah! He puffed out his cheeks, disappointed. I'm meant to be leading it. Well, come back at 8 o'clock tomorrow. I'm sure you'll do brilliantly. I don't suppose I could sit in on your session? I've never done one of these things before. I could do with some experience. Bad idea, said Mary abruptly. We're a private group. I explained. You won't even know I'm here, I promise. As he stepped into the room, we all rushed to dissuade him, talking over each other in our panic. You can't dash. This is private, dash. You don't know dash. Mary, her face so red it was nearly purple, looked like she was strongly considering battering him with a rubber bone. She couldn't. None of us could leave the circle. All we could do was watch helplessly as he waved off our complaints, grabbed a spare chair, and forced it into the small gap between Daphne and Stephen. The group stared at him, aghast, then as one, turned their eyes to me. Damn it, Shirley. Why did you breed children with such weak immune systems? Right, I looked at the stranger expectantly. Martin, he supplied. You're here now, Martin, for better or worse. We have strict rules, and we expect you to follow them. Of course, I wouldn't dream of disrespecting your group. I'd bit my tongue down on the comment that barging and uninvited had done just that, and instead said, the most important one is you're now here until the end of the session. No getting up to go to the loo. No smoke breaks. No fear there, he cut in, beaming at me. I smiled weakly back at him. Secondly, we respect each other here. You might hear things that sound strange to you. It's not your place to interrupt or invalidate anyone's experience. I understand how important respect is, he said sincerely. Then, with just the faintest tone of pompousness creeping into his voice, I'm a trained counselor, you know. Is the ink still wet on your certificate? Mary snapped. Mary, I said quietly, less a caution, more plea. She shot Martin a burning look that suggested she would be having words with him in the car park later, but said nothing further. Would you like me to start? Daphne asked. I felt a rush of affection for her. She was fiddling with the bear's ears, clearly uncomfortable, but she was still trying. That would be lovely, Daphne. She took a deep, steadying breath. It's been hard since the nights started getting longer. Winter's always the worst. You know, I've got a lot of other little bears at home. She picked the bear up by his paws, made him dance a little jig in her lap. They help, but when I wake up and see it standing there at the bottom of my bed, she shivered. And when she spoke next, her voice was little more than a whisper. It's those eyes, sewn shut, but it still stares at me. Do you all have sleep disorders? Martin butted in. No, I said shortly. And please don't interrupt. Sorry, Daphne, please carry on. You hear stories about stuff like this, she resumed haltingly. People seeing terrors in the night. They always seem to be there one moment, gone the next. You all know it doesn't work that way for me. Once it turns up, it's there until sunrise, following me around the house, always watching. It was a bit more bearable when I still had Graham. He used to sit up and watch films with me, hold my hand on the sofa. Her eyes were sparkling now. In the early days, anyway, by the end, I saw Mary's hands tighten around the bone. I knew how she felt. Logically, I knew I couldn't blame Graham. It took a special sort of person to stick around and deal with the stuff when they didn't have to, and as we'd all learned, those sorts of people were few and far between. Still, I hated him for leaving his poor, sweet wife to suffer alone. Stephen leaned over to Daphne, offering her his handkerchief. She took it with a grateful smile and dabbed her eyes. Creative writing. Martin burst out. What? I asked. You're a creative writing group, right? Mate, you've been told already to keep your gob shut. How hard is it? Mary demanded, jabbing the bone in his direction. She's right, I said. Please don't make me ask you again. When I looked at Daphne, she shook her head, holding the handkerchief tight against her cheek. I raised my eyebrows at Mary. Fine, she huffed. I'll go. As I was saying before we were so rudely interrupted, she shot Martin a scorching look. He's been causing trouble this week. More than usual, I mean. Has he been in the toilets again? I asked. Yes, literally in this case. That's how I ended up with this. She tapped her black eye. Drunk punter went into one of the stalls, and a little shit popped his head about the loo. Of course, it's not the place you expect to find a little old man in a bowler hat, freaked him right out, came running out, ranting and raving, swinging fists. She let out a grunt of dissatisfaction. 2 of my staff gave their notice that night. It's becoming an issue. We don't have a problem hiring. They hear the pub's haunted and think they might get a little laugh, a little scare, but the moment it inconveniences them. Wait, Martin interrupted. Mary heaved a heavy sigh. Here we go. Are you claiming that you're experiencing some sort of, I don't know, genuine paranormal phenomenon? When Mary's only response was a hard stare, he turned to Daphne, and you too. She gave him the smallest nod, just enough to confirm his statement. Martin. I cut him before he could say anything further. I was very clear about our rules. We don't invalidate anyone's experiences. But you should... No. He caught himself, held up his hands in a gesture of contrition. You're quite right. Your group, your rules. Please do continue. Mary's scowl made it clear she had no intention of picking up where she had left off. Pete and Daphne both pointedly ignored my looks. Only Stephen met my eyes. He cleared his throat, then suggested gently, perhaps you would like to? I really wouldn't. Not when Martin was now leaning forward, gaze intent and full of sickening concern. But I could hardly expect the others to open up if I refused to do so myself. Right. I shifted in my seat, ball in my hand into a fist around the keyring. Yes. Well, you all know how it started. Martin isn't acquainted with the story. I could have swung for Stephen if I wasn't so certain he wasn't intent on torturing me. The rest of us were content to keep our experiences within the confines of our small circle, but he still had a streak of the preacher about him, and it was focused on warning the general public about the dangers we were intimately acquainted with, even if they branded him as crazy for his struggles. If you wouldn't mind. Not at all. The sentiment wasn't entirely convincing through gritted teeth, but it was the best I could manage. When I was a kid, we used to go to the seaside on holiday. I forced my fingers to unfurl and held up the keyring. Here, to be precise. Martin squinted at the keyring, his smile coming too quickly. It looks lovely. It was a bit of a shithole. The smell of greasy chips drifted back to me across the years. I remember the sky that always seemed to be slate gray, even in summer, and the cold by the sea water on my thighs. I could feel the musty arcade carpet beneath my cheek. Dad's arms wrapping around me and hauling me against his chest after I dozed off. Somewhere behind him, Mum and Becca bickered about her dress sense, or how her headphones seemed to be glued on, or whatever other piece of teenage rebellion my sister had engaged in to do my mum's head in. I grinned in spite of myself, but it had its good points. Arcades, fish and chips by the sea, that sort of thing. We went every year until we lost my dad. Mum couldn't face it after that. The year after he died, she took us somewhere else instead, some broken down old cottage in the middle of nowhere. That must have been very difficult, said Martin somberly. The disruption in routine after SHHHHH. Mary hissed, ignoring the interruption. I pressed on. There wasn't much to do there, unless you like looking at trees, or playing board games with missing pieces. Mum spent a loft time sleeping. That left me and Becca, my sister, to entertain ourselves. Becca was going through a phase, as my mum said. That was putting it lightly. Their arguments could rage on for hours, always ending with Becca slamming her bedroom door so hard that the trinkets on my shelves rattled. They were constantly at each other's throats. She'd even started butting heads with Dad before he died, but she always had time for me. I was 11 on that last holiday, and Becca 16. My friends' older siblings wanted nothing to do with them. They were too old, too cool, to be seen in the company of children. Not Becca. She still helped me with my homework, and threatened to slap the shit out of any kids that gave me trouble. I was a little in awe of her. So when she told me there was a way to see Dad again, and asked for my help, I agreed. We went to bed that night, and waited until we heard Mum snoring. The mixture of excitement and stomach-freezing terror slammed into me, as strong now as it had been more than 20 years ago when I huddled beneath my blanket, waiting for the quiet creak of my door and Becca's summoning whisper. I followed Becca into the woods, and then... what? My memories of that night were fragmented, like a photo album someone had taken a pair of scissors to. I scrunched my eyes shut, pressing my knuckles hard against them as I tried to remember. There was an old book, thick, bound in leather. God knows where she got it. Stole it, knowing Becca. It wasn't in English. I remember that much because she read out loud from it. I flexed the index finger in my left hand, staring down at the thin white scar that ran its length. Becca's hand had been gentle as it held mine. "Sorry, little un," she'd whispered as she raised a knife. "I only need a few drops." She took my blood. Flames danced behind my eyes, drifted into a fire. When she called out, something answered her. Red eyes piercing the darkness. A growl, so deep it reverberated in my bones. But it wasn't Dad. She told me to run. I remembered branches whipping against my cheeks, my chest burning as my lungs desperately tried to squeeze in air. I didn't realize I was crying until someone pressed a handkerchief into my hand. I took it without looking up. Meeting any of their eyes was more than I could bear. The shame was too deep. "You did the right thing," said Mary firmly. "If you hadn't listened to her, you would have been taken too." "Taken?" asked Martin. Daphne spared me from having to answer. Becca vanished that night. Their mom called the police. They searched the woods, nothing. "You believe someone kidnapped her?" "Something took her," Mary answered in a tone that brooked no argument. Martin was either oblivious to the warning or chose to ignore it. "I mean no disrespect to your sister, but it sounds like she was troubled, arguing with your mom, grieving for your dad. Couldn't she have run away?" "You seem to be under a misapprehension," said Stephen. "Namely, that this was an isolated incident. It wasn't. We have all caught glimpses of this beast." For the 1,000th time, I sent up a silent prayer of thanks for my friends. The first time had returned. 1 year to the day after the night Becca led me into the woods. I was alone. I lay frozen in bed as its red eyes pierced me through the darkness, quaking each time it let out another growl. Staring into its terrible eyes nearly cost me my sanity. But I didn't dare look away, barely dare to blink, certain it would pounce if I gave it an opening. I'd weathered the next few anniversaries in my mom's bed, clinging to her arm as she slept the deep sleep of the medicated. When I left home, I took to spending those nights in churches. Finally, I found a group of friends willing to sit in vigil with me. Martin made to rise from his chair and was immediately greeted by a chorus of "No!" from all sides. Blanching, he dropped back down. Instead, he sought my eyes, his gaze full of sympathy. "I really am sorry for what happened, losing your dad and your sister, and at such a young age. But," he hesitated, fiddling with the cuffs of his jumper, before seeming to come to a decision. "Monsters, like the thing you're talking about, don't exist. You know that, right?" I took a deep breath, and did my very best to keep my tone level as I replied, "How do you explain it, then?" "Grief. Trauma. They can do strange things to a person." "And the fact that we have all seen it too?" asked Stephen. Martin swiveled in his seat to face him. "Group delusions and hallucinations are documented phenomena, particularly in tight-knit groups that share a belief system." Mary scoffed, opened her mouth to retort, but before she could, tap, tap, tap. We all froze, except for Martin. I was vaguely aware that he was still laying out theories, building up steam, but my focus was entirely on the tapping coming from the other side of the window. I knew better than to look, but I couldn't help but listen. The others, the members, had paled. Pete's face had little more color than cadaver. Across the room, a deep rumble was building in Ed's throat. What do I do? Shirley would know. Damn it. I looked from face to face and saw my own panic reflected there. Stephen rescued us. "Young man, I appreciate you've heard things that are contrary to your worldview." There was an undeniable tremor to his voice, but he pressed on. "It's difficult. I understand that. It does not excuse your unconscionable rudeness. We ask only for respect. You have failed to give that to us." "I don't mean any disrespect." Martin pressed an earnest hand to his heart. "But there's no such things as ghosts and goblins and things that go bump in the night. Such beliefs stem from illness." Tap. Ed began to growl properly now, a low, guttural sound that rose up to fill the gaps in the room. Mary opened her mouth, but Stephen held up a finger to forestall her. In some cases, that's true. Not in others. Certainly not in ours. There's medication that can help you, Martin insisted. Therapies. This is our therapy. Stephen said coldly. It's not. It's a shared delusion. It's only going to make you worse. You need... Tap. Martin whipped his head towards a shuttered window. Do you hear that? No, said Stephen. But we've heard quite enough out of you. Tap. There it is again. Surely you can hear it. We don't know what you're talking about, I said. Your cat does. He gestured towards Ed, who was now standing, claws digging into the fabric beneath his paws, eyes locked on the window. It's coming from over there. Don't. We shouted in unison as he made to rise from his seat. Once more, he dropped back down with a thud. As he looked from one person to another, realization dawned on his face. You think it's some sort of monster, don't you? Silence but for the tapping. I'm gonna go over there. Please don't, Daphne whispered, and show you there's nothing to be afraid of. It'll be the end of you, you bloody fool, said Mary. Martin stood up. Stephen jerked reflexively, as if he was about to go after him. He caught himself at the last moment, gripping the seat of his chair to anchor himself in place. Martin, his voice was low and urgent now. I've participated in dozens of exorcisms in my time. I've seen things that have stretched my belief to the point of breaking. Everything I've seen, all my experience, tells me one thing. If you go over there, you will die. Why risk it, said Mary. If there's even the slightest chance he's right, you're gambling with your life. The look Martin gave her was soft and full of pity. If I play along with this delusion, I'm only hurting you. He stepped outside the circle. With every step he took, we pleaded, begging him to come back, to sit in the safety of the circle. When he reached the window and made to raise the blind, Pete wrapped a trembling hand around my wrist and shook his head. I nodded acknowledgement. It's too late, I murmured, and when the others still clamored at Martin, raised my voice to a shout. It's too late. Just don't look. I grabbed Pete's hand on one side and Stephen's on the other. A moment's hesitation, in which their faces cycled through denial, fury, and finally, helpless resignation, before the others followed suit and joined hands. How the fuck did this happen? Mary spat. We turned our eyes to the floor. Silence now but for Ed's yowling, and beneath it, the soft click of the window opening. Hello, Martin called. Then, see, there's nothing there. It must have been the branches on the... Oh, Pete's nails dug into my skin. Are you okay? The slightest tremor entered Martin's voice. You seem... You look... I think he realized his mistake at the end. There was a clattering, as though he'd tried to jerk back and slam the window shut, only become tangled in the blinds. I think he tried to scream. He only managed a sharp inhale, a muffled groan. Heavy thudding followed, like feet pounding against the ground and finding no purchase. Then silence, except for Ed. His screeching had died down to a continuous growl, low and full of warning. As for us, the survivors of yet another deadly night, we could only remain in the circle, stuck there until the candles burned down. I didn't dare look up, but I could hear Daphne's soft whispering, and Pete muttering something unintelligible beneath his breath. At last, the candles began to burn out. When the last flame guttered, Pete shot up and ran as fast as his shaking legs could carry him to the storage cupboard. Daphne followed after him, arms wrapped tight around her waist. As she turned to close the door behind them, I saw her cheeks were wet. Sorry, she mumbled. I just can't. That left me, Mary, and Stephen to deal with the aftermath. Mary's fingers had punctured the rubber bone, and Stephen looked as though he hadn't had to fight the urge to open his bottle so hard in years. But when I looked into their faces, I saw they were resolved. On 3, I suggested. When they both nodded, I reminded them, don't look out the window. I counted us down. We looked in unison. Martin lay slumped half out the window. Something stood beyond him, staring in at us from outside. Our well-trained eyes refused to see it. If I get that window shut, can you move the... My lips refused to form the word body. But they understood. On it, boss, said Mary. They went first, Mary leading the way with her mouth set in a grim line, grabbing hold of one of Martin's legs each. They heaved. He came free of the window and landed on the floor with a sickening thud. The moment he was clear, I moved in. For a dreadful moment, my arm refused to move. I was frozen in place, trapped by the fear that cold fingers would wrap themselves around my wrist when I reached the window. They've done their part, I told myself. Now it's your turn. As I reached the handle, I saw the woman standing outside, still silent, mere feet away. I allowed my eyes to slip out of focus, giving no sign I'd seen her, other than the hammering of my heart, which I was certain filled the whole room. I snatched the windows shut, then closed the blinds on her dreadful form. Only then did I allow myself to take a deep breath as I turned to inspect our next problem. The only outward signs of damage were the rivulets of blood that had trickled from Martin's ears, oozing down to stain the shoulders of his jumper. That and his eyes. They were wide and glazed, frozen open by the horror he had witnessed. The last thing he would ever witness. What are we going to do with him? Said Mary, her voice clipped. Do we call the police? And tell them what? I asked. I don't know. She shrugged. We could say he collapsed. And how do we explain why we waited hours before calling for help? I wrapped my arms around myself, shivering. They'll start poking around into what we do here. Then, next thing you know, dash. We end up locked away in some hospital, finished Mary. At best, I murmured. I'll sort it, said Stephen. He was staring at Martin's corpse, face pale and clammy. That could be dangerous, cautioned Mary. I can handle it, he said sharply, running a shaking hand over his mouth. I wouldn't have suggested it otherwise. I hesitated. Do you want company, or would you prefer if we? Privacy is preferable. On the cat tree, Ed had finally fallen silent, but he turned his lamp-like eyes on Stephen, tail twitching, as I ushered Mary to the storage cupboard. Stephen called after us hoarsely, "Draw a salt line, just in case." We slipped inside, to where Daphne and Pete were waiting for us, her arm wrapped tightly around his shoulder. They glanced at us, read our grim looks, and looked quickly away again. When I turned to close the door, I caught a glimpse of Stephen, his jaw unhinging, dropping down to his chest as his teeth sharpened into fangs. He advanced on Martin, his clawed hands grasping. I slammed the door and reached for salt. Story 8. I beat the shit out of Hatman. My name is Jimmy and I'm 23. I wouldn't call myself a high achiever. Mostly, I'm just tired. I work at a bookstore that specializes exclusively in nautical fiction. Yes, only nautical fiction. And I live in Port Hazard. Now, before I tell y'all about what's been bugging me, I'll give you some more detail on the city. Port Hazard is a place where strange things happen. Hell, the words strange and eccentric don't do the city justice. Our official mascot is a 7-foot-tall pigeon named Bartholomew. The main street is flooded with 3 inches of perfectly clear, odorless maple syrup every Tuesday. The local weather station regularly issues warnings for intermittent hailstorms that only pelt people who are feeling ambivalent about their career choices. Those pellets hurt, man. Now that you know the context, you'll understand that when the sleep paralysis started, I was mostly just irritated. Oh, great, I grumbled internally, eyes wide open, staring at my bedroom ceiling. My body would be a solid block of lead. Just what I needed. Like I don't have enough stress wondering if the bookstore is finally going to replace the shelf that has a crab infestation. The recurring figure, the spectral visitor of my nocturnal prison, was an entity popularly known as a Hatman. He was exactly what his name implied, a towering, thin shadow, defined only by the outline of a broad-brimmed fedora and a trench coat that seemed to absorb all available light. Most people described feeling pure, primal terror when the Hatman materialized. I, however, found him vaguely pathetic. He never did anything. He just stood there, leaning in a way that suggested either deep malice or an extremely bad back, and watched me. You know, if you're supposed to be some kind of horror, I thought one night, straining to wiggle my left big toe, at least fix your posture. That slouch is going to kill you faster than the existential dread you're failing to give me. After 2 weeks of the Hatman's silent, judgmental presence, the initial novelty wore off. Sleep paralysis wasn't scary. It was just a massive inconvenience. I could barely move in the mornings and kept dropping stacks of Captain Ahab fan fiction at work. My boss, Jade, chewed me out after that. My patience, already thinner than the Hatman's silhouette, snapped. Enough? I muttered to my reflection one groggy Tuesday morning, noticing the dark circles under my eyes. I'm taking this to professionals. In Poor Hazard, professionals was a loose term. The only medical establishment I trusted, well, more like the only one I dared approach, was the private practice of Dr. Cole. His clinic, located in a former lighthouse on the edge of the financial district, was named the Lighthouse of Humors and Mild Ailments. The waiting room was furnished exclusively with oversized wicker furniture, and the background music was a loop of a man vigorously tuning a very out-of-tune harp. There were no other patients. Thankfully, after a 20-minute wait, during which I seriously considered stealing a copy of Moby Dick, the early years abridged from a nearby end table, a voice boomed, startling me upright. Ah! The young man with the strained familial genetics. Come in, quickly, unlike the decaying passage of time. My schedule is very, very real. I walked into the office, craning my neck immediately. Dr. Cole was, to put it mildly, imposing. He was easily 7 feet tall, with a mass of white hair and a bow tie that rotated slowly. From what I remember him telling me, it was powered by a tiny brass mechanism. He wore a crisp white lab coat, but instead of trousers, he wore Bermuda shorts and hiking boots. Dr. Cole didn't use a desk. He perched on a repurposed lifeguard chair, looking down at me with eyes that seemed to have personally seen several different geological eras. The rest of the room was filled with model trains. Jimmy, the chart says, yes, recent onset of nocturnal sensory deprivation with spectral accompaniment. The Hatman, yes? Dr. Cole said, his voice a deep baritone that rattled the window panes. Yeah, that's him. Just stands there, watching me. I need something to make him stop. I explained, tried to sound professional, while avoiding eye contact with a rotating bow tie. Dr. Cole hummed, tilting his head. The classic, don't like the spectral accompaniment dilemma. Well, we could try the standard boring route. Better sleep hygiene, reducing screen time, coming to terms with the fleeting nature of existence. He paused dramatically, adjusting his brass-rimmed spectacles. But that sounds dreadfully dull, doesn't it? Dreadfully. I agreed, relieved. I would rather die than reduce my screen time. Quite. No. For a Port Hazard problem, we need a Port Hazard solution. One must occasionally meet the chaos on its own terms. Dr. Cole hopped down from the chair, a movement that felt like a localized seismic event, and rummaged through a metal cabinet labeled slightly illegal pharmaceuticals. He pulled out a small, unlabeled pill bottle containing exactly 2 tablets of a deep, iridescent purple. They looked less like medicine, and more like crystallized deep-sea plankton. Here we are, Dr. Cole announced, handing the bottle over. The Lucid Catalyst. Dosage, 1 tablet, 20 minutes before you plan on sleeping. It's an experimental compound, you understand. A cocktail of synthetic nootropics, a splash of comet dust, and a pinch of wishful thinking. I stared at the pills. Will this stop the paralysis? Dr. Cole's massive face split into a wide, genuinely unsettling grin. Stop it? Oh no, it won't stop the phenomenon, Jimmy. This city wouldn't permit such a mundane resolution. This, my boy, simply nullifies the peripheral, inconvenient factors of the phenomenon, specifically the part that keeps you glued to the mattress. He winked. The bow tie spun faster. It gives me mobility during paralysis. I can move. You will be fully, physically present in your state of spectral encounter. You may find your motor skills a touch rusty at first, but it will still be functional. Now, get out of here. And remember, if you start seeing a mime arguing with a sentient traffic cone, That's a side effect, and you need to drink a gallon of whole milk. I left the clinic, the small bottle of purple pills clutched in my hand. Instead of fear, a slow, hot ember of resentment began to glow in my gut. The Hatmen have been stealing my nights, ruining my precious few hours of rest. I was tired of being a passive participant. That night, I decided that if the Hatman wasn't going to stop visiting, he was at least going to pay a price for the inconvenience. I took one of the purple pills. It tasted like static electricity and old pennies. 20 minutes later, I fell asleep. A few hours after that, I was lying on my back. The familiar, suffocating pressure of sleep paralysis descended upon me. The room grew cold, the air thickened, and there he was, the Hatman. He was materializing near the foot of the bed, his dark presence like a hole punched into reality. Immovable, paralyzed, I confirmed the familiar feeling. Then I felt a faint, tingling sensation in my right hand. I focused, visualizing my fingers clenching. With a loud, audible creak from the bed springs, my hand obeyed, clenching into a fist. I was in sleep paralysis, but I could move. The Hatman, having likely perfected his judging stance over several centuries, tilted his head slightly. If a shadow entity could look confused, this one did. A vicious grin spread across my face. I leveraged my elbow and, with an awkward, lurching effort, managed to sit up in bed. I pointed a slightly shaky finger at the dark figure. "Hey, asshole," I growled, my voice thick with adrenaline and sleep deprivation. "You want to take up my nights? You gotta fucking earn it." I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood up. My movements felt heavy and slightly delayed, like walking underwater, but it was better than nothing. The Hatman took a single, slow step back. I lunged. It wasn't graceful, but it covered the distance. I threw a wobbly right hook aimed right where a jaw would be. My fist connected. I knew it because my knuckles felt like they had just punched a block of solid ice wrapped in heavy velvet. The Hatman didn't fall, but he stumbled, the crisp line of his fedora blurring for a millisecond. The fight that followed was less an epic battle of good versus evil, and more two extremely tired individuals trying to throw cinder blocks at each other underwater. I, fueled by 2 weeks of poor sleep and the strange purple medicine, was wild and desperate. The Hatman, taken completely by surprise, fought back with silent, unnervingly cold strikes that felt like getting hit with a frozen fish. It ended quickly. The Hatman wasn't a world-class brawler, but I was just an exhausted bookstore clerk. One powerful, silent spectral uppercut clipped me on the jaw, and I hit the floor. The pain, while dull, was immediate. As I lay there, winded and thoroughly bruised, the Hatman paused. The asshole seemed to be contemplating his victory. Then, as quickly and silently as it had arrived, the shadow entity dissolved into the darkness. I lay on the floor for a full minute, panting, staring at the empty space where a transcendent demon had just been. I hauled myself up, my ribs aching, my jaw throbbing, and my ego absolutely destroyed. "Okay," I groaned, rubbing a rapidly forming knot on my forehead. He rocked my shit, but I moved at least. I didn't manage to get much sleep after that. My adrenaline had spiked and then collapsed, leaving me an achy, nauseous mess. Plus, every time I tried to close my eyes, I kept seeing the crisp outline of that damn hat. The next morning, I looked like I had, indeed, lost a fight with a frozen fish. My left cheekbone was a spectacular shade of greenish blue, and my lower lip was split. I called out of work at the nautical bookstore, claiming I had come down with a severe case of seasickness of the land. Jay bought it. Then I immediately headed back to the Lighthouse of Humors and Mild Ailments. The sound of the heart being tuned was louder this morning. The enormous wicker chairs seemed to sag in sympathy or maybe pity. I didn't even sit down, I just stood there waiting. Dr. Cole appeared immediately, gliding out from his office. He spotted me, and his eyes immediately focused on my face. "Jimmy, my boy," he boomed, gesturing dramatically toward my facial topography. The tiny brass motor on his bow tie audibly whirred as it rotated in the clinic's ambient light. Goodness me, it seems you didn't just meet chaos on its own terms. You tried to give a robust hug. You look like you lost a staring contest with an approaching freight train. It was more of a fist fight with a really cold coat rack, Doctor, I mumbled, gingerly touching my swollen jaw. Look, the meds worked technically. I could move. I could fight. But I lost, and I got 0 minutes of actual sleep. I'm starting to think my sleep is more important than meeting chaos on its own terms. I tossed the bottle, which now contained only one remaining purple pill, onto his giant lifeguard chair. I don't want to fight the Hatman, Dr. Cold. I want to sleep. Do you have anything? Anything at all? A boring, mundane, completely non-eccentric pill that would just knock me out for 8 hours. Dr. Cole sighed, a sound like air escaping a very large balloon. He picked up the bottle and examined the last iridescent pill, the professional melancholy. Ah, the sweet allure of the mundane, he murmured wistfully. A sound gold, Jimmy. A perfectly reasonable request for a completely unremarkable, non-haunted city. He straightened up, his towering figure filling the space. But I am afraid that I must deny you. We are experiencing a rather profound, citywide shortage of all effective soporifics and sedatives. I blinked, waiting for the punchline. A shortage? Like a supply chain issue? Worse, my friend. Far worse. It's a port hazard issue, Dr. Cole said gravely. You see, the last shipment of our standard issue sleeping pill, the remarkably effective Snooze-You-Lose 5000, was intercepted just outside city limits by the infamous band of sentient plastic lawn flamingos. Aye, the ones who keep stealing garden hoses. The very same. They believe, quite incorrectly, that the molecular structure of the Snooze-You-Lose 5000 was the key to unlocking the secret of eternal lawn care perfection. They stole the entire stock. And since the second most popular option, Mildy's Dreamers, was recently recalled because it was discovered to cause users to spontaneously combust, we are left, as you young ones say, high and dry. He spread his enormous hands in a gesture of helpless resignation, until the flamingos are subdued, or until the city's distributor finds an alternate supply that hasn't been transmogrified by the residual runoff from last week's fog event. All I have left for you is the lucid catalyst. My shoulders slumped. This was classic port hazard bureaucracy mixed with cosmic absurdity. I couldn't even be mad. It was just how things worked here. No reliable sleep aid exists because magical garden pests stole it. So I'm stuck with the fight-inducing purple vitamins. I said flatly, Dr. Coldbeam, you are stuck with the potential for glorious, mobile participation in your own nightmare, Jimmy. Think of it as a test. You have one pill left. Use it wisely. Or, perhaps, foolishly. Foolishness often leads to the most compelling tales. I took the bottle. The last pill felt heavy inside. I thanked him, walked back into the daylight, and immediately saw a mime argue with a traffic cone about the definition of yield. I wrote a mental note to grab some milk on the way home. Unfortunately, the reality was crushing. I needed sleep, and the only way to get a restful night now was to somehow beat the Hatman into submission so thoroughly that he decided my apartment was no longer worth the hassle. I couldn't do it alone. The time for professionalism was over. The time for family was now. I pulled out my phone and dialed the one person I knew who would love the idea of inflicting violence on a silent shadow man. Frank, I said when he picked up. It's Jimmy. I need you to drive to Port Hazard and bring the bat. The phone line crackled. Frank's voice, a gravelly sound that usually preceded the lifting of something extremely heavy, answered, Jimmy, what is it? I'm busy. Frank was never not busy. He was perpetually occupied with tasks like replacing the engine of a decommissioned tank, or perhaps wrestling a particularly stubborn gorilla. He was a complete opposite of me. Where I was a pale, anxious clerk, Frank was built like a brick shithouse, made for aggression. He was 8 years older, and his idea casual attire was a ripped denim vest and tactical boots. I'm not well, Frank. I'm covered in bruises. I need your help, I said, wincing as I spoke. Bruises? What happened? Did Bartholomew finally corner you? He asked, referring to the city's giant pigeon mascot. Worse, it's the Hatman. Sleep paralysis. Except I can move now, thanks to some weird doctor. I tried to fight him last night. I lost. Badly. I need backup. And I need you to take one of these purple pills with me tonight. There was a long silence from him. I could hear a sound like heavy steel chains rattling, followed by what might have been a small, muffled explosion. A shadow demon that wears a hat, Frank repeated, slowly, the way a lion might contemplate a particularly juicy gazelle. You're telling me there's a literal, tangible creature that exists purely to be intimidating, and you can physically interact with it and it fights back? Yes, he's tough, Frank. He's cold and silent, and he uses spectral uppercuts. Spectral uppercuts, Frank scoffed. There was a sound of something large dropping. He's in for a treat. Then, where are you? What time? This was the beautiful part. This was why I called Frank. Frank didn't question the cosmic or the eccentric. He was just in the fight for the love of the game. Midnight, my apartment. And Frank, I only have one pill left. We have to split it. Are you sure you're up for this? It's going to hurt. Hurt. Frank let out a rattling, phlegmy laugh that sounded like ball bearings in dryer. Oh, Jimmy, you forgot my superpower. You've been so wrapped up in nautical fiction, you forgot the family lore. The lore that you use to bench press refrigerators? No, you idiot. The good one. The medical one. Frank's voice dropped to a conspiratorial, yet loud, whisper. I have congenital insensitivity to pain, remember? I could get hit by a truck full of rabid badgers, and I wouldn't feel a thing. This is literally the perfect opponent for me. Plus, Frank paused with dramatic effect, and I knew it was coming. Plus, he continued, his voice rising, I've been trying a new supplement stack. I'm currently operating at about 60% pure, unfiltered roid rage. That motherfucker's silent brooding is about to get a very loud, very angry wake-up call. My chest swelled with relieved pride. This was better than any sleep aid. Perfect, Frank. Just perfect. I'll see you around 11. And seriously, don't forget the bat. Maybe bring something else. 2. We need maximum impact. The bat is in the truck. I also have a tire iron and maybe some brass knuckles. See you soon, nautical nerd. He hung up before I could object to the nautical nerd comment. Whatever. Frank would bring his aluminum bat, a relic of his brief, fiery career as a semi-pro softball player before he got banned for beating up the opposing team. I needed something equally blunt and effective. Something that represented my own unique blend of domestic exhaustion. I walked into the kitchen and grabbed my weapon, the heavy, slightly battered cast iron frying pan. It was perfectly weighted and still had a faint scent of the scrambled eggs I'd ruined this morning. Perfect. By 11:30 p.m., Frank's truck, a lifted, mud-splattered monstrosity that looked like it ate smaller vehicles for breakfast, came barreling down my street. Frank emerged, a giant shadow himself, far thicker and more solid than a Hatman could ever dream of being. He was wearing a faded Doom t-shirt and jeans, and was gripping the aluminum bat so hard that it almost crushed it. All right, squirt, Frank grunted, kicking my apartment door shut behind him. Walk me through the plan. Where does this trench coat wearing freak materialize? By the bed, I said, holding up the frying pan. We take the pill, we wait for paralysis to set in, and then we just beat the absolute shit out of him until he decides to haunt the guy who manages the maple syrup reserves instead. Frank grinned, a wide, challenging expression that somehow managed to be both terrifying and reassuring. Sounds like the best night I've had in months. I carefully split the last purple pill down the middle with a kitchen knife and handed Frank his half. This will be weird, Frank. You're gonna feel stuck, but then you can move. It's a very heavy feeling. Frank tossed the purple sliver into his mouth and swallowed it with a gulp of water. I spent an hour in a sensory deprivation tank last year just to see if I could make myself feel claustrophobic. Bring on the weird. We lay on my bed with the lights shut off. Frank held his bat resting on his shoulder like an executioner. I gripped the frying pan. The grease smelled comforting in its familiarity. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight. I felt the pressure descend first. That leaden, familiar weight. My limbs locked down. I was floating in the cold, thick air of pure inability. Then the Hatman arrived. He was in his usual spot, tall, dark, and utterly motionless. Frank was next. I heard the sudden, sharp intake of his breath as the paralysis hit him. But a moment later, I heard something else. A low, menacing rumble came from Frank's chest. I pushed myself up, the pill's power kicking in, turning paralysis into slow, grinding mobility. I saw Frank also sit up. His eyes were focused entirely on the Hatman, and an animalistic energy was starting to leak from him. The roid rage was cooking. I gripped the frying pan. The Hatman was in for a treat. "Hey, Hatman!" I yelled, my voice still thick but steady. "I brought my brother. He's pissed off. He's got a bat. And you know what? He can't feel pain." The Hatman recoiled and physically stumbled back 2 full paces, the shadowy fedora outline wobbling. I swear, the little bitch looked afraid. This was going to be cathartic. Frank let out a roar. Less a human scream and more the sound of a grizzly bear discovering its salmon dinner has been replaced by tofu. He launched himself off the bed. The battle of the astral plane was on. The Hatman, clearly an experienced fighter against panicked, immobile victims, was surprisingly agile. He dodged Frank's massive, sweeping bat swing, which left a deep, echoing thud in the air. The entity retaliated with a rapid series of spectral body blows aimed at Frank's chest. The blows hit Frank, and they looked brutal, like being repeatedly struck by a pneumatic hammer. Frank didn't even flinch. He just laughed, a manic, pain-free sound, and swung the bat again. This time, it connected with the Hatman's leg. The entity shrieked, a sound like grinding sandpaper, and dissolved momentarily before forming a few feet away. "Jimmy, get him!" Frank bellowed. He was walking forward, winding up for another, even heavier swing. I charged from the side, lifting the cast iron frying pan high over my head. I aimed for the hat. The strike landed with a metallic clonk. The Hatman crumpled, falling to his knees. Frank didn't hesitate. He brought the aluminum bat down in a sickening, repeated rhythm. Whack, whack, whack. "Where's your menace?" "Huh?" Frank yelled, his voice ragged with sheer delight. "Where's the existential dread? All I'm feeling right now is awesome." The Hatman tried to push himself up, his spectral form flickering, desperately trying to regain the dignity of its silhouette. I knelt down next to Frank, gripping my pan. "You stole 2 weeks of my sleep, you trench coat wearing freak." I screamed, swinging the frying pan sideways and connecting squarely with the Hatman's midsection. The entity let out another horrible sound, somewhere between a hiss and a whistle, and its outline shrank slightly, as if it was being compressed by sheer violent force. We kept at it. Frank used the bat to methodically crush the Hatman's limbs, one by one, while I provided the chaotic, noisy distraction with a frying pan. It was pure, frantic catharsis, after what felt like an hour, but was probably only 3 minutes. The Hatman was reduced to a twitching, flattened blob of black shadow on my wooden floor. Frank, breathing heavily, stood over it, gripping the bat. He was untouched, save for a massive dent in the handle of the bat, which hadn't been there before. "Look at him!" Frank spat, nudging the shadow mass with the toe of his combat boot. "The big, scary Hatman. Get up. Fight back. I still can't feel anything. Hit me harder." I lowered the frying pan, watching the black mass pulse faintly. "I think he's done, Frank. I think we showed him that my apartment isn't a good place to annoy people." Frank finally lowered the bat, the rage receding just enough for a grin to return. "Yeah, this was a much better prescription than the regular pills the flamingos stole. Let me know if you want to fight them too." We stood there, 2 brothers armed with housing appliances and sporting goods, victorious over a spectral entity. The victory was glorious. The sense of accomplishment was immense. The silence in the room was finally back to normal. Then, the first pale light of dawn crept through the window. The sleep paralysis, the effect of the meds, and the Hatman's presence all lifted simultaneously. The shadow mass vanished. The air returned to normal temperature. Frank and I were left standing in the middle of my bedroom, panting. One of us still wired on adrenaline and supplements, the other completely spent. I stumbled over the clock. 6 a.m. My elation crashed into the cold reality of my responsibilities. "Oh, God, Frank!" I groaned, running a hand through my messy hair. I looked at my brother, who was starting to do a celebratory push-up on one hand. I didn't sleep, and I had to be at work in 2 hours. Frank got back on his feet. Yeah, you're a real tragedy, Jimmy. Look, man, go make some coffee or something before you collapse. I'll get out of your hair. He clapped me once on the shoulder, firm enough to nearly topple me, then headed for the door. Text me if that son of a bitch comes back, he added casually, as if that were a normal sibling request. Then he left. I dragged myself to the kitchen on legs made of wet sand. The apartment was dim and still. I opened the cupboard, expecting salvation in the form of bitter, scalding caffeine, but all I found was an empty container lying on its side. 2 weeks of sleep paralysis and insomnia had drained the last of it without me noticing. I stared at the barren shelf for a long moment, then let out a tired, humorless breath. Of course, I muttered, just my fucking luck. Story 9. My name is Sonny. Have you ever heard of Groundhog Day? It's an old movie about a guy reliving the same day over and over again. It is a simple concept, and there's movies, books, comics, and whatever other media that pops into your head that had done this topic to death. Of course, it is a scientific impossibility. I tried to find any possible reason behind it and couldn't. Maybe there is something esoteric out there that makes it possible. Really, that is the only other possible explanation. I did my due diligence, tried every possible angle I could, tried every single possible thing that popped into my mind. Yet at the end of all that fuckery, I basically began doing the same thing over and over again just to kill the time. I could never explain why and how anything that happened on the 21st of July, 2025, made any goddamn sense. And I had a lot of time to kill. To make a long story short, I am 24 years old, in body. In mind, well, I lost count. A couple of centuries? Maybe a millennium? Who knows? The main difference between me and the guy in Groundhog Day is that if I survive that day, I can go on for as long as I physically can. That much I am certain. But it's not like I am able to survive beyond that cursed fucking date. The world really made it difficult for me, and everyone else. Now, what made it so difficult? Well, the world went down under quicker than the F-16s that stopped the plane back in '01. From what I gathered, it is up to me to stop the fucking apocalypse. Yep, you heard me right. The end of the world, as we know it, happened on the 21st of July, and little old me is tasked with stopping it. And I thought I won't be going back to normal until I do it. And am I some sort of fucking superhero? Absolutely fucking not. I am just an average guy with an average build and average everything. I ain't anything special, but I make up for the averageness in sheer goddamn dedication of not dying. I got pretty good at it. The longest I survived was the 2040 something. Couldn't really count the days when the world was plunged back into Stone Age, and honestly, it was difficult to count because the sun was blotted out for who knows how long. I died from an infected wound caused by those acid-spewing pieces of shit. That was the first time I made it that far. Oh, and yeah, my name is Sonny. That's all you need to know about me, really. God, I am a horrible writer. Anyway, I was born in France, but lived in the U.S. for most of my life before moving to the bustling metropolis of QC City. Why, of all places, did I go halfway across the world to an Asian tax haven? Well, with a population of 2 million and in need of workers, I took a gamble and got my ass onto a plane. Not to mention the rent is pretty cheap. Surprisingly, and I could hop over to Okinawa or the mainland whenever. Okinawa is the Japanese islands, for you geographically uneducated. The place was something. Combine New York, London, Tokyo, Shanghai, Hong Kong, and whatever big city comes to mind. It's that times 10 for QC. I mean, you see all that on video and all that jazz, but goddamn, it really does impress you the first time, but then after a while it kind of gets stale, goes to the background. The novelty just wears off. You know, I worked as a receptionist in some Japanese hotel chain. It helped that I was fluent in English and French and knew a decent bit of Japanese and Mandarin. There were quite a bit of French speakers over there, Considering it was a French colony for a time, it's no surprise. Really, the salary was fantastic. Triple what I'd make back home. But there is one issue: the salary might have been 3 times as big, but the prices were 5 times higher as well. Despite the low rent, a $10 sandwich was not cheap. So soon enough I was penny pinching. And this entire bag of bullshit began when I was in a convenience store on a day off. Yeah, the 21st is Saturday. I buy the most basic groceries and overpriced cigarettes. Cancer premium, I know. I'd always return to the point of looking at the girl who works at the register, her robotic smile faltering just slightly when I go in to give her a handful of coins that add up to $84.12. I did the conversions. That just barely covers the cost of a single small bag, enough to last me 3 days. For if I really stretch it to Spartan levels of rationing, then I went home and ran into my older neighbor walking his dog. Twinkles would try to bite my bag and fail. As always, he'd mention the festival in the center, and sometimes he'd give me a Zippo lighter if I forgot to buy one at the store. After that, I'd go into my small apartment, and while unlocking the door, I'd see my other neighbor, a girl around my age dressed up for a night out. She'd always be on her phone and mention the Dragon's Cafe. That's with 2 F's, I know. Keep that name in mind, it'll become important later. Now, everything happens like clockwork, even if I am home early or later than usual. Then I remember even before all this shit began, I had a mental breakdown from the constant stress and decided to go out to the festival. Treat myself for once, because for the love of God and all that is holy, I deserve that at least. I worked my ass off. Despite having barely any money left, I got onto the train and went to Hayashi Station. It was crowded as all hell. I hate crowds. Alas, I wandered around a bit and enjoyed the atmosphere and the mix of European and Asian aesthetics. Good music. Food, I can't really tell. Smelled nice. I avoided bars because the markup on drinks was unholy. So I tried to find a convenience store, buy myself a cheap drink, and sit somewhere on a bench like a bum. Cheap over here is theft elsewhere. I did just that. I sat on a bench right across the Dragon's Cafe. I didn't follow my neighbor, I ain't a creep. 'Twas just a coincidence. Neat little place. Crowded as all the other places, but the decor and interior were really well done. I could even see the neon-lit bar from the outside. It really was a shame I couldn't go in to enjoy it then. Then I saw a woman come out of the place. A woman so beautiful that when I saw her, I swear the entire world stopped, and I couldn't hear anything or see anything but her. Red hair and green eyes. She looked at me, or at least it looked like she looked at me. Then her smile faded. It quickly turned to that of absolute fear. Then I heard like a crack behind me before everything went black. At least I knew I wasn't that ugly. The next thing I saw was a girl, but not the red-haired beauty. It was a girl at the grocery store with a robotic smile, telling me the price of the groceries. I felt the same wave of dread at the price go through me at that moment. But the thing is, the past events felt like a dream, like I was daydreaming. I kept on doing things normally. I remember to grab a lighter though, and then the deja vu hit. The neighbor, the empty street crossing, Twinkles, the girl dressed up for a night out. Horrible fucking bag too, expensive as all hell. But good God, I never noticed it the first time. That bag doesn't go with her black dress at all. Anyway, I am rambling. The second iteration was chaotic too. I died quickly at the festival as well. But this time I saw what got me: a hairy 20-foot-tall black fur behemoth, killing and smashing everything in its path. I saw others as well, some bigger, some smaller, all equally deadly. Now, why don't you try and convince people? I did. That was one of my first reactions. And what did I get with that? I got arrested a couple of times, put into a mental institution for a few hours, before dying, of course. Over the course of this whole bullshit life I had, I got charged with aggravated assault, public indecency, public intoxication, public nudity, robbery, and I can't remember what else. Never all of the above in one lifetime. Thankfully, murder of another human being was not on that list. Well, I never got charged with killing, but that's beyond the point. The point is, I tried. I tried to convince people in a nice way. Sometimes coerce them. Sometimes I tried to make shit up. Sometimes it almost worked. once it actually fucking worked, but most of the time, it didn't. But the result is all the same. Death, and Earth being turned into a physical manifestation of hell. A few iterations later, I managed to position myself so as to not die immediately, and I learned how to avoid those things. I survived for I think a few hours. Then the corpses of the people killed began to, well, begin walking again. Let's just say that being crushed is a whole lot better than being eaten alive. It took me quite a bit of time before I managed to survive for more than a week. I always retain my memories. It was so stressful in the beginning, but you kind of just get used to it. The novelty wore off, similar to when I first arrived at QC. Anyway, I decided to hole up in my apartment. I learned that those things spawned at the festival. It eventually arrived to where I was as well, of course, but it gave me some breathing room. I died hundreds of times before I managed to survive my first month. I tried desperately to stay in the city, but I still haven't attempted to escape it. So I did. I smuggled myself onto a boat to mainland Japan and got off scot-free. It took a few attempts, but I did it. Why didn't I buy a ticket? As I said, I was fucking broke. But it was early back then. I could have just robbed some place or someone. But then again, even when I paid, well, I ended up drowning. But I did manage to get there a couple times. Anyway, I was dead within the month. It got to Japan as well, China too. I remember as Alaska communications from Europe ceased a few days before that death. Then on the day I died, the American continent went silent. It wasn't just in QC, it was global, and the world's militaries could do nothing to stop it. Not even nuclear Armageddon would help. That much I know. It would help them more if anything. I realized it originated there in QC, at the festival. I couldn't warn people, of course. I tried everything as I said. Then one iteration, an iteration where I decided to remain in QC. I managed to kill one of those things. This one in particular had wings. It looked like an oversized bat of sorts. It was dumb. I coaxed it to slam into a glass window. It of course smashed through, but it was disoriented. Then I and a couple others began stabbing it and hitting it and shooting it with whatever we could, killing it after it took an unholy amount of brutality. I died soon thereafter. All of us died. But from that point onward, I never saw the flying piece of shit again. Other monsters were capable of flight, but nowhere near the size of that fucking thing. They weren't as a big threat compared to the bat thing. Not to mention, even those smaller ones were a lot less numerous than before. At least I think. I realized that there were beings that in the beginning spawned the smaller ones. Harbingers, I called them. If I managed to kill any of them, it would mean that in the future, they would not be a problem, and maybe we could get a fighting chance then. But I also realized that I had to kill them. Or at least, I could administer the finishing blow. But I am one man. How can I fucking do that, you ask? I have all the time in the world. I did not do it alone, of course. How could I? I am not Rambo to go through with it all. Now that bar which I mentioned previously, the Dragon's Cafe. Something happened inside and right around it that made people have some sort of powers. I assumed since I was nearby, just across, that I was in the area of effect. The thing is, I am just a normal human being, while the others have superpowers. Not on the level of Superman or the X-Men, but with enhanced strength and agility. Some can manipulate matter. Water, air, earth, fire, metal, and so on. They were always helpful. I reckon I was blessed with a fucked up version of immortality. The red-haired girl was among those. She probably had the most powerful tool. She became Zeus, basically. I won't go into details. You can use your imagination, and you'll probably be right. In the beginning, I did join up with them, but as time went by, I realized that might not be optimal. I knew too much about them. The good guys would eventually become sadistic warlords in a post-apocalyptic world. They held power, and some of them were irredeemable. Then I went through a phase of thinking, well, if I am trying to save these fucking monsters, they ain't worth saving at all. And to be honest, I was kinda right. But then again, it took a few years. And I eventually came back to try and make a difference again, avoid the depression phase, and the phase of becoming some sort of vigilante, jackass, Borat kind of combo with a sprinkle of schizophrenia. I found out the bad way, that you don't judge a book by its cover. And I died at their hands more times than once. Claire killed me a couple of times too. The red-haired girl, that is, the best option for me was to nudge them toward the target and hope to whatever higher power there is that they kill it or wound to the point where I or someone else can finish it off. Even if they killed it, it kind of had a similar effect, but not as poignant and direct as mine. If they killed it one iteration, it would become slightly weaker the next, and I managed to get most of those bastards in that way. Sometimes I had to be the sacrificial lamb. I died in every possible way imaginable. I can give you a list of the best and worst ways of dying. Drowning is preferable to some ways the monsters kill you. The spindly spider fucking things and their venom especially. I was shot, hanged, ripped apart, burned alive, crushed, burned in acid, atomized, pulverized, had my skin harvested, and so on. I turned into a zombie more than a few times as well. And let me tell you, that isn't a pleasant experience either. But being electrocuted hurt in more ways than one. Claire didn't hold back sometimes. And that lack of restraint, it kind of stung. You get used to death, funnily enough. But the dying part is what still makes me think twice before doing something stupid. Some part of your brain still tries to keep you alive. But after some time, you learn how to temporarily turn that part off and basically throw yourself into death without a second thought. Eventually, using various methods and ways, blind luck included, I killed all of them. The last one was the most difficult. It was humanoid but intelligent. I think it somehow knew about my power, about my reincarnation. I don't know for sure. I think it could read minds. But I killed it by making it chase me and others into a nuclear power plant. So I doubt it can... I don't know. It wasn't immune to radiation, that one. And with that, it wasn't immune to 3 magazines of 9mm to the skull. Neither was I to either. It sucked. I coughed up my lungs, literally. My skin fell apart like rotten leather. My flesh boiled. But I was happy. I was fucking happy. I thought this was the end. I was so sure of my theory. I will feel this pain one last time. I'll be dead, for good. But it wasn't. The sweet embrace of death didn't take me for the last time. No. I was back again, to that convenience store. Maybe, just maybe, I thought the world won't go shit at least. I could continue living my life. Or maybe I could end it myself. After so much, I didn't really know what to do, what to live. I simply couldn't live with that type of weight and experience. I couldn't. I decided to give it a shot. To try and turn my life around, maybe get married. Ask Claire out, again, without the power and apocalypse shenanigans. I knew her well, so I think I have a shot with normal Claire as well. But no, it was again the same shit all over again. It wasn't as extreme, but those things still kept coming out and killing everyone. It took them longer, but they still pushed humanity into extinction. I had no other choice. I have no other choice. If it isn't the monsters, it is me. Maybe it is that bar. Maybe something under it. I try to find something. Nothing. So maybe it really is me. Maybe I am the epicenter of all this shit. It starts there at the festival, right where I was. Exactly at that bench, where I sat, drinking a stale beer and smoking an overpriced cigarette. But I cannot die, not truly. If it isn't me, it is some kind of cult or something in the city, near the festival. Nothing. I found nothing. And believe me, centuries, millennia of searching, even for one man. You can do a lot. You really can do a whole fucking lot. I excavated, I searched, I raised an entire post-apocalyptic society following my fucking prophecies. And I had some people way fucking smarter than me try to crack the code. Nothing. I have no other choice than to assume it is the city itself. I have to erase it from the face of the earth, from all record and from the fucking timeline if need be. But even if it is nuked to Kingdom Come, it does nothing. So I have to do something else. Something no one ever thought of. If you are hearing this or reading this, I managed to do it somehow. I don't know how or how long it took me. Probably thousands of years of trial and error. Tens of thousands, who knows, until I got it just right. I am damned to this fate, but I am still driven to do something. I must do something. And if it means erasing an entire city, an entire island, and its population from existence, Yes, if I erase this island, I will change the course of history. And if I change the course of history, I might have never been born in the first place. Yes, then I'd be dead. No, no, no. I'd never have existed in the first place. And I'd stop this. I hope maybe this fucked up deity, it, will find some way to continue my agony. Peace, a fantasy. Life, inevitable. Death, inescapable. I am sorry. I am doing this writing thing for myself. I tried to warn the world about it through this very platform here. It worked about as well as you'd imagine. Who knows, maybe in some timeline, I am a good writer. But in this I am just a bug. I am sorry to my family, to all the people of Kyusei and this planet, which I wronged in any way. I did what I could. I did what I must. But I did succeed because I have all the time in the world. My name is Sunny, and I never lived, nor have I died. Story 10, The Avalanche. According to the University of Vermont, a mature sugar maple can produce as many as 200,000 leaves in a single season. The town of Mt. Enos was set in a sea of these trees which stretched for miles across the hills, rolling high up onto the mountain for which the town took its name. Memories of my childhood in that small town feel different from the rest of my life. Enchanted, beguiling, whatever the word might be. The forest was a constant, nearly magical presence in our lives, imposing itself on every horizon. People would tell stories of nymphs who planted the unfathomably massive orchard. Stories of beasts which clung to tall trunks with vicious claws, waiting to drop on any who wandered too close. I never believed the stories, though I understood why people told them. Something so majestic as the forest of Mt. Enos seemed to demand reverence. I used to believe that God reveals himself to us in grand displays of natural beauty, watching the billions of tiny, verdant sprites dancing in the late summer winds as the sun set far beyond, and the dazzling blizzards of fiery reds and vibrant yellows mixed throughout with shades of somber orange under autumn's dying sun. These moments felt to me like looking upon his face. Nowadays I live in Arizona. We could all see the signs of what would later be hailed as a miracle as early as March that year. At first, nobody could quite put their finger on what had changed about the tree lean. No large swath had fallen, and no new copse had grown. To the untrained eye, the difference was both unmistakable and indiscernible. John Ratley, proud proprietor of the Mt. Enos Nursery, was the closest thing we had to an arborist in a town of 500. He was sent out to examine the trees, and when he returned his eyes were bright like those of a child. It's magnificent. All ran like ribbon laced through his every syllable. You see, the trees are in their budding season. Each bud represents a new branch and new growth. Now, ordinarily, we'd be seeing somewhere in a range of 50 to 200 new buds per tree per season. He seemed to suddenly realize that he'd outpace his breath, drawing in a large puff of air before continuing to speak. This year, each tree is plastered with the suckers. I'd estimate upwards of 14,000 new buds per tree. Old Mr. Ratley looked around the room, hoping to see that the gleam in his eye become infectious. But nobody cared anymore. The mystery had been solved. The fun was over. Mr. Ratley offered up a meek, it would be a green summer, as we all filed out of town hall and back into the humdrum of our daily lives. He was right. It was impossible not to notice how much more alive the forest had been that summer. The new branches crossed each other in wild intersections, each fighting for every inch of available space. By the end of August, the trees had grown thicker and heavier than ever before. The overabundance had been a great source of beauty. I've never seen such a decadent array of vibrant, verdant shades before or since. The winds of summer shattered into tiny fragments against the foliage which had grown so thick that the leaves behaved as if they were a singular, solid object. Strong gusts were transmuted into gentle breezes as they wove their way through the near-infinite green gauntlet, causing the leaves of the trees to vibrate gently with the pathetic force which remained. I spent a lot of time that summer staring out at the tree line and asking questions to the empty air. Questions of who I am, why I'm here. The kind of questions that come to mind when you're looking God in the eye. I never received any reply. The weight of the excessive growth forced the trees to sink deeper into the earth, their roots stretching up and out as if clinging to the edge of some infinite chasm, as if afraid they might fall. The word weighed heavier on all of us as the season drew near. At the time, we thought it would be little more than an inconvenience. We had no idea what was in store. First, there came a pale, sickly yellow, then rich, crimson reds began to leer out from deep within the green tree line. By mid-September, the color had largely bled away, leaving behind desiccated remnants of what once was. Deep, modest, earthy browns and orange like rust grew dominant in the forest. The leaves had dried, but the weakened westerly winds had not the strength to shake them loose of their perch. It was mid-October before the first of them lazily listed down to the earth below, falling at the feet of its mother. The wind, affronted by the stubbornness of the foliage, summoned up all the strength it had ever known. A vicious, persistent gale from all directions ripped its way through the autumnal labyrinth of branch and leaf. The winds hooped and wailed together as they brought ruin down upon the forest, and there, caught in the middle, was the town of Mt. Enos. From all sides, titanic walls of dying plant matter rose high enough to block out the sun. In my memory, the rays of the sun cast each individual leaf in stark relief as it oozed through the space between them. It would have been awe-inspiring, though frightening, but we were not allowed even enough time to react. A moment after we saw their rise, they were upon us. There was a rustling sound, like the jittering wings of a trillion locusts. Then a jolt shook the foundations of my home, joists and beams flexing horribly as the collective weight draped itself across the house. The walls bowed visibly inward, and I heard the shatter of glass as the tidal wave of autumn's newfound fury pressed in from all sides. A horrible realization struck me. My wife had been outside. The dahlias outside our bedroom window needed to be dug up for winter. The tubers would freeze and die otherwise. I found her there in the window. Her body had been hopelessly and brutally squeezed against the vinyl siding of our home, the one she had begged and pleaded for despite it being outside our budget, through the window pane. A deluge of leaves spread itself across the space where her neck used to be. The torrent had driven her throat against the shattered glass of the window. Brutal, horrible. Crimson splashed itself across the growing pile of decaying plant matter. I felt my soul shatter into a million miserable pieces as I lifted her severed head, bringing her forehead to rest against my own. I held my eyes closed as tightly as I possibly could. I screamed and sobbed and raged loud enough to shame the winds outside, which now whistled terrible reverie through the bare, interwoven branches of the forest. I wanted to drown out all else beyond the feel of her rapidly cooling skin against mine, begging the warmth that was left there to hold on for even a minute more. As you can imagine, finding my wife like that made a terrible introduction to the isolation of being trapped beneath the ever-growing banks of crisp, golden leaves. The colors themselves had become completely imperceptible as the leaves above blocked more and more sunlight. It wasn't long before I was left in abject darkness. I had no way to appreciate the true scale of it at the time. I knew my house was definitely buried completely, but I had no idea that the pile stretched another 20 feet beyond the second-story roof. I stayed in darkness for what was either 6 weeks or 6 days. The inky blackness of my grief wrapped itself around me, causing me to feel as if I were among my own kind as I stood there in the void which used to be so full of love and light. Food wasn't an issue, as I hadn't been eating much at all. I'd fumble for a can of beans in the dark, bash it against a linoleum floor until it burst, and then blindly slurp the contents. One night, as I fumbled through the pantry, I felt my hand land upon something waxy and smooth. A candle. It felt like I hadn't seen light in 1,000 years, and the idea of it kind of scared me, despite this strange trepidation. I didn't hesitate to search desperately for hours to find a box of matches. When I finally got it lit, I sat beside the candle, as if it were a campfire. I fell asleep there. When I woke up, my breathing had become difficult. I could feel by the way that my lungs burned that oxygen had become scarce. The candle's fire had eaten too greedily of the air while I slept, leaving next to nothing for my respiratory system. I was desperate, the cilia in my lungs clawing and clamoring for every available iota of breathable air. The decision I made was one rooted in panic, but I don't regret it. I threw open the front door and laid the faintly burning candle at the precipice. The fire spread with a vengeance, as if offended by the sheer amount of unburned flammable material. I slammed the door in horrified realization as the fruits of my panic spread viciously across the massive pile. The sound of it was completely indescribable. Each leaf brought fire to dozens more, all crinkling and folding upon themselves, sending embers far off to spark new colonies of flame. The air began to circulate as heat moved throughout the pile, bringing a rush of oxygen as the leaves which held my wife against my home burst into flame. I had no choice but to let it burn. The pictures, the memories, the bed we shared, her severed head. I had to let it all go or face annihilation. I slammed the door closed and jammed a wet towel against the crack on the door, begging for her forgiveness as I sobbed in fear. In the end, for whatever reason, my home was one of few spared. The fire had torn through the town of Mt. Enos, killing 300 people in all. The cleanup was slow and gruesome. Many had been making their commute when the leaf storm fell over our town. Mr. Ratley, the pseudo-botanist from before, was found with his head trapped in the jamb of his car door. The coroner thinks he was trying to climb out when the weight shifted and pinned him. Many others were found trapped in untrue cars, dead of apparent asphyxiation. As I assisted those of us who were left in pulling body after body from the derelict vehicles, unbuckling safety belts and car seat straps alike, and looking into countless, lifeless eyes, I could only think one thing. I don't regret starting that fire.